Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and our wonderful audience. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you to this remarkable event, resonating with the spirit of growth, sustainability, and community. I am Raghavendra Pai, advisor to the Conclave Committee Symbhav 2024. It is with great joy that we welcome you to the 7th edition of our flagship event, Symbiosis Law School Pune's Conclave 2024, an event that not only marks a significant moment in our calendar, but also stands as a testament to our collective commitment towards nurturing our environment and honoring those who contribute to our academic community. This year, Symbiosis Law School Pune's Conclave is organized in collaboration with the prestigious Jean Monnet Chair. The Jean Monnet Chair has undertaken a myriad of activities in furtherance of climate justice and climate awareness, such as the Distinguished Guest Speaker Series, roundtable discussions with stakeholders and policymakers, international conference on climate change and sustainable developments in the legal context, the Training the Trainers program, and outreach activities amongst many others. We're also pleased to inform that we have SEC Online and Times as the media partners for the 7th edition of this esteemed gathering. Under the guidance of Professor Dr. Gurpur Ma'am, the Conclave Committee headed by Ishita Khosla and Vanshika Gupta has helped put together today's event. But before we delve into the heart of today's proceedings, let us take a moment to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests whose support and guidance have been invaluable in shaping the fabric of our institution. Please join me in welcoming Honorable Justice Shri Sanjay A. Deshmukh, Judge, Bombay High Court. Professor Dr. Shashikala Gurpur Ma'am, Director, SLS Pune and Dean Faculty of Law, SIU. Senior Advocate Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Mr. Navneet Vibhav, Partner, Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas and Company. Mr. Purusharth Singh, Partner, Kocher and Company. Mr. Narendra Kumar Jain, Vice President and Head of Environment Corporate, Jubilant Engravia. Advocate Ms. Dhanya Mallar. And Dr. Aparajita Mohanty Ma'am, Deputy Director, Academic, Symbiosis Law School, Pune, as they grace us with their esteemed presence. We would also like to extend our heartiest welcome to the esteemed faculty members, staff members, and enthusiastic students. Symbhav is the annual General Fest of Symbiosis Law School, Pune. Since its inception, Symbhav has grown from strength to strength, attracting participants from various universities nationwide. It serves as a testimony to our core philosophy, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. By fostering unity among diverse participants and institutions, this event marks another exciting chapter in our tradition of bringing together students from across the country to celebrate cultural, sports, and legal festivities. In the spirit of embracing change and innovation, the theme for Symbhav 2024, the 16th edition of the fest, is Odyssey of Dreams. The theme encapsulates our collective odyssey through the realms of imagination and aspiration, beckoning us to explore new horizons and pursue the boundless dreams that await us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to host the 7th edition of SLSP Conclave. The Symbiosis Law School Pune's Conclave is one of the flagship events under the aegis of Symbhav. Conclave is a legal panel discussion cum interactive session that intends to provide a forum for expounding new ideas, reflecting on new themes, and delving into the minds of India's youth through the organization of a discourse with eminent jurists and influential personalities from across the nation. In the previous editions of SLSP Conclave, we have been honored to have hosted legal luminaries such as retired Honorable Mr. Justice Deepak Mishra, former Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice Revati Mohite Dere, Judge, Bombay High Court, retired Honorable Mr. Dinesh Maheshwari, Advocate Gaurav Bhatia, Ms. Ruby Singh Ahuja, Mr. Jayant Bhatt, among other luminaries. We were privileged to host legal experts such as Ms. Tanu Banerjee, partner at Khaitan & Co., Ms. Priyanka Chaudhary, founding and managing partner of Priyanka Chaudhary & Associates, and Chandana Arwal in the 2023 edition with the theme, The Intersection of Artistic Expression and Censorship in the Age of New Media. As the decade of company law in India draws to a close, the discourse of the corporate law in India has evolved from mere profit maximization to encompassing sustainability in business practices. Keeping the same in mind, we are thrilled to continue our tradition of intellectual engagement with the theme Enhancing Legal Frameworks for Sustainable Business, Prioritizing ESG and Climate Action, aiming to foster meaningful discussions on the evolving role of corporate law in fostering sustainability and accountability within the corporate sector. It is our honor to invite Professor Dr. Shashikala Gurpur ma'am, Director, Symbiosis Law School Pune and Dean Faculty of Law SIU to deliver the welcome address. Director ma'am has been a beacon of inspiration, guiding us towards excellence and fostering a culture of learning and innovation. Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am is an accomplished academician, passionate researcher, a Fulbright scholar and a double gold medalist. Ma'am has a teaching experience of over 26 years, which includes tenures at NLSIU Bangalore, SDM Law College Mangalore, Manipal Institution of Communication, University College Cork, Ireland, and has been with Symbiosis Law School since 2007. Ma'am has also delivered over 325 invited lectures, workshops, and seminars in prestigious universities across the world. Alongside pioneering EU legal studies in India, Dr. Gurpur has more than 85 articles, research papers, 2 co-authored books, and 16 book chapters to her credit. She has been nominated as the member of the MCCIA Corporate Legislation Committee for 2020-22 and invited to be a member of the International Advisory Board of the CCLE, the Centre for Common Law in Europe, UCD Sutherland School, Ireland, for 3 years, which aims to provide a focus in the EU for research into the common law and its interface with EU law. Ma'am is also on the editorial board of LexisNexis Butterworths, Journal of IPR by CSIR, Law and Policy Journal, Dublin, and is a member of the Curriculum Development Committee, Bar Council of India, the Academic Council of the National Judicial Academy, and the International Consortium of Law Schools. Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am is presently the Jean Monnet Chair Professor in EU Climate Justice Law, Governance, Management and Policy, a prestigious honor and grant accorded by the European Union. What makes this achievement unique and remarkable is that this is the first Jean Monnet Chair granted in Pune and Western India, the first in law to be chaired by a woman, and only the second in India in the field of law. She has also been listed in the book 100 Legal Luminaries of India by LexisNexis and has been conferred with the Kittur Rani Channamma Award 2018-19 by the Government of Karnataka for her achievements in the field of education and contribution to women empowerment. I welcome you to deliver the address, ma'am.
Good morning, respected Chief Guest, Justice Sanjay Deshmukh sir, and all the esteemed guests and panel speakers who are decorating the first row or among the audience who later on come here and be the panelists, and all our dear students, our faculty members, and most of all, the working committee of the Conclave and the working committee, the conveners committee of the Symbhav, along with others. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Honorable Justice Sir, it's our privilege to host you again. You were our inspiration and guide when you were the district judge in Pune. We accomplished maximum district legal aid services along with you when you were here for a few years. So with those sweet memories, we thought that today's very unique conclave should have you as the chief guest, and you were very kind to accept our invitation and agree, sir. We are eager to listen to you. I must put on record today, as I welcome you all, that this conclave has been completely a student initiative which started 7 years ago. And we had very normal life then. It was pre-COVID, and it is the youthfulness and the young spirit of our students with the innovation, as our Chancellor always says, passion in the belly and compassion in the heart and innovation in the head. So our students truly manifested it as a concept. We had some of the wards of sitting judges and officials in the judiciary and leaders in parliament, leaders in also in law firms. So they all came together and they conceptualized this and they asked us. We at Symbiosis, we always encourage a partnership of learning between students and teachers in taking the institution forward. I tell you today, if we are a strong brand, it's not only because of our management's vision, but not only because of the hard work and guidance by our faculty team, it's mostly due to the passion of our young students who are encouraged here to bring their their ideas to the table, who are sometimes harshly groomed to give the best, and then what you see is this kind of a conclave. So 7 years ago when they brought this idea, it was the international conclave which was planned. That year they couldn't take it off, but 2 years later they did that. We were very fortunate at that time in the very first conclave to have CII and FICCI partner with us. We had the old auditorium where we brought the leaders of industry together, and then one of the leaders was an economist. So that's how the first conclave was born. And then we never looked back. We had another one which was looking at right to remain obscure, which was in the space, digital space. And I thought that at that time it was too progressive for our students to take that, and it represented absolute sense of autonomy, respect for human dignity, and also critical engagement with the technological developments of the time. But I tell you that last 4-5 years has been a glorious period in the law school in terms of winning grants after grants in the global competition. You know, winning a EU grant is not easy. We had 4 to our credit, and this is the 5th one. And then we have a small one, but a very significant one, JM Module Grant, where Dr. Bindu is sitting in the audience. She is leading that. It's on ease of doing business in EU and India. That also has got a dimension of business where we intersperse it with human rights and concern for the green politics. So this is where you see. I must also put on record that it was a conclave which was responsible for kickstarting this year a new LLM, which is going to be in the area of TMT law. In the whole world, Queen Mary University has been the pioneer in that in the UK, and then we have 1 or 2 British universities following suit only this year, whereas in India, first of its kind, we are going to kickstart only thanks to our students and their idea of conclave. And I must tell you, in 2010, there is always, as Dr. Mazumdar says, historical repetitions. We had Supreme Court judge sitting here when we did the 3rd or 4th conclave, and today we have sitting judge of our High Court here. Similarly, 2009, it was the students who gave us the idea, let's start LLM in intellectual property law. That's how our LLM in innovation and intellectual property law started, which is most sought after, because Pune is the hub of innovation. It has a National Innovation Center, among other things, National Chemical Laboratory and many other things. So this is just a sheer coincidence of today's conclave, which is going to witness a very serious discussion in terms of ESG, because we have been engaging with this idea on all fronts. We did the trainers training program for young leaders in Pune, including people from all walks of life, such as NGO. We had a collaboration with NGO, where one of the lead NGOs, which is partnering with the Nobel Prize winning group of Al Gore's, and we had ESG training for the corporates. But there was no serious legal discussion except my concept paper on climate justice. Recently, we had a discussion in Hyderabad in Nalsar's collaboration, where I was speaker on consumer protection, and I put in the theme of climate justice and sustainable development goals. So we have been looking at all the interfaces with the climate justice, with the need for environmental and climate change related governance in India. So today's attempt is the first debut attempt, bringing the best experts in the field who are engaged in all facets, corporate governance facet, litigation facet, because litigation is considered as a tool in climate justice, important tool. And then we are having people who are the leaders in the law firm, among others, and independent practitioners like our own alumna, Dhanya Mallar, among others. And Justice Saab is here. He is going to be definitely the spokesperson of how judiciary, sir comes from Satara, how judiciary is going to be a very important facet in making the change. And as we have seen in India, lot of humane dimensions, environment-related dimensions, its human rights facets have been triggered by the lawyers and validated by the judiciary. So in a way, this conclave represents all the stakeholders of climate justice, and it represents all the stakeholders in legal education, I must say, and for Symbiosis Law School in particular, because we have a parent here in Senior Advocate Sanjay Upadhyay. We have a kind of remote parent in Justice Deshmukh sir as well, because he brings all his relatives and village children, educates them, supports them. Sir has a very great philanthropic side. So he is also a stakeholder, aside from being judge as a stakeholder in legal education. And then we have the law firm leaders here who are important stakeholders as buddies expertise as mentors and coaches to our students in their internships and employment. We have other stakeholders in the form of alumni as well as mentors in Dhanya. So this is how it's a very, very rich forum, and the industry represented by Mr. Jain, which is a very important stakeholder in all our universities' development. So I welcome you all once again to this kind of a, what we call in our Hindu philosophy, Yoga Yog, which is a kind of unusual coincidence, as our Chancellor always says, of coming together of all stakeholders and deliberating on this important theme of contemporary relevance and enriching the collaboration with Jamani Chair activity, which is coming to an end by 2025 in terms of reaching its objective to develop such a conclave, which I think will result in enriching our proposed transnational climate change law policy program, which is another EU grant, where we are looking at a transnational program with the global south, in Southeast Asia, with the 3 countries, with 6 universities altogether. So a lot of things are happening here in this crucible of innovation. We don't talk it loudly. We want our work to speak for itself, and we want our students to be the face, because we are here in serving our nation, in serving the community, and in serving the cause of justice through the agency of education, which for us is all-encompassing, and that's the possibility that you saw. Can you believe that undergraduate students could kickstart such a forward-looking, futuristic curriculum in this country in TMT law? And I'm sure that the same students through this conclave will contribute to the new facets of training in ESG, because right now we don't have any fully fledged course in any law school on ESG. So that's where we want to move. Welcome one and all.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful address. We would now like to request Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am to felicitate our guests as we express our gratitude for their unwavering support and contribution to our event and our institution. Thank you, ma'am. Our chief guest today is Honorable Justice Shri Sanjay A. Deshmukh, Judge, Bombay High Court. Justice Shri Sanjay Deshmukh began legal practice in July 1993 at Satara District Court, specializing in civil and criminal matters. He was elevated directly from the bar to the esteemed position of District Judge in 2008, serving at Parbhani, Darwa, and Gadinglaj, among other locations. Justice Deshmukh also served as a special judge, MCOCA and NIA at City Civil Court, Bombay. He served as the Principal District and Sessions Judge in Bhandara from July 2017 to January 2021. Justice Deshmukh also held the positions of Secretary and Senior Legal Advisor to the Government of Maharashtra Law and Judiciary Department at Mantralaya. He has served as the Principal District and Sessions Judge in Pune from July 2021 to October 2022, when he was elevated as Additional Judge of the Bombay High Court. Justice Deshmukh holds a BA Honours degree from LBS College Satara, LLB from IMLC College Satara, and LLM from New Law College Pune, achieving commendable ranks at Shivaji University Kolhapur. It is an honor to have you with us today, sir. I invite you to kindly address the audience.
Good afternoon, madam, and all. The budding lawyers are really stakeholders here, and I expect that they will, with the help of such conclave, improve the positions of poor persons in the country. The serious problem is problem of unemployment. and word business is one of the part of this conclave. People's good is the highest law. That is the Cicero have guided us. When I was the secretary in Law and Judiciary Department, I was senior legal advisor of state government of Maharashtra. There were so many secretaries, and they used to come to me, they used to pose some questions to me, and they were usually tackling the problems. And they were facing so many problems, and fear in their mind was that whether court will take any action against us. What will happen? Can we be able to reply the court when contempt proceeding is going on? After facing their so many problems, once I posed some questions to them that I want to pose to you. I asked them, what way you are tackling your problem? What is your method? What is your formula? What way you are going to tackle your problem? So now I am posing this question to all of you. What way you are going to tackle your problems? We all are always tacklers. We are always tackling something. Maybe personal tackling, maybe legal tackling, maybe tackling of any other nature. But what is the correct way of tackling the problem? That is the question. And if your answer is wrong, don't worry, I will not criticize, because we all are, underline, we all are students of law. Don't forget that. So what is the way? What is the method? What is the formula to tackle the problem? That was the question which I found and put to the senior officials of the state government. So they said that, sir, we are IAS officer. That was the first answer. Is it correct or not? Is it answer? It is not at all an correct answer. Then I asked them, my question is very different. I have not asked you what is your designation, what is your education, what is your qualification. My question is that, what is the way you are going to tackle your problem? So they said that, sir, we are having strong logic and we are solving our problems with the help of our strong logic and common sense. Whether it is correct answer or not, don't worry about answer, at least answer. Is it correct or not? So what way you are going to tackle your problem? Yes. Answer was correct, but not perfect. I asked them, are you believing that your own logic and your common sense is sufficient to tackle the problem? And if it is so, then why you came to my chamber? Then I told them, whenever you are going to tackle any problem, whatever that may be, except your personal problem, particularly in the field of law and policy, etc., regarding the decisions of the state, etc., I told them, first of all, you have to see whether any law is applicable there or not. If law is applicable, you are guided by law, you are bound to follow the law, first thing. Then they said, then sir, we can employ our logic or not? Can we use our common sense or not? I said, no. You can use your common sense and logic, but not at this stage. If there is no law, what can be done? Then what is equivalent to law? That is to be employed. So can anybody tell me what is equivalent to law, but it is in fact no law? This you will not find anywhere. This is my brainchild. This way I am thinking, and this way I am tackling so many problems. So second thing according to me was, you may correct me if I am wrong, science or expert. You take the help of science or expert. Because science is also, may not be law, but equivalent to law. Then your policy. What is the policy? Policy may not be law, but it is equivalent to law. What is the policy? Decided by the state government or central government. You are bound to follow that policy. Then they said that, sir, now on the third step, can we use our common sense and logic? I said no. Your logic may not be sufficient. Then there may be a person having lot of experience. So you have to tackle the problem with the help of that person who has experience to tackle such problems. Go to the retired secretary, discuss with him. He will give you some idea and you tackle the problem. Then they said, now can we employ our logic or not? No. I said no. Then what remains, sir? Yes, you have to research. Now internet is there. Just we were discussing about that. Internet is there. You can search and see what way this problem is solved in other state, what way this problem was solved in other countries. If it is rational, you can use that formula. If it is suiting to the facts of the case, facts of your problem. Then I said, now if there is nothing, no any source which we have discussed, then you can employ your logic and your common sense, which may not be sufficient, but within the four corners of rationality. In one judgment before some days, I have observed that when there is no law, a rationality of judge leading to the justice. What? A rationality of a judge leading to the justice is law. Then those secretary went to chief minister that one different secretary has been joined our office. We'll have discussion with him. Then chief minister called me. There was discussion and he told me that in the meeting of all ministers and in the meeting of all the secretaries, please you address this fact, this important aspect of the law. So this is the way you can tackle the problem, every problem regarding law. So some other questions which I want to put you is that, can any person make law? Or two persons make law? Or group of persons make law? We know law can be in the form of draft as a bill, can be put in before the legislature and legislature has to sanction. So can any individual make law? So individual cannot make law, isn't it? But individual can make law. I will give an example of such making of the law. If somebody has drafted a bill and decided course of action regarding his property, so that bill which he has made in his individual capacity has force of law and it is law, isn't it? Two persons have contracted, 3 or 4 persons have contracted, then that is also law. In practical sense, in the legal sense, it is not law. That is also law. Then one more question, which I usually asking to the students, and I expect student may certainly answer this time. In case of conflict between the statute and principles of natural justice, what will prevail? This is very simple question. Yes, what will prevail? Principles of natural justice or statute? Yes. Students answer. then there is no necessity to draft any law. Principles are always there. What will happen if the liberty is given to the judges to give verdict on the basis of principles of natural justice? Every law is presumed to be in consonance with the principles of natural justice. In the absence of law, we can use the principles of natural justice. And that too mostly in the civil cases, and in criminal cases we cannot use, isn't it? Then another question which I want to pose to you is that, can you give any example of implied law? Implied law. We have seen law, no law, now implied law. Example of implied law. Unwritten law, logical law. There are so many terms. So there are so many examples of implied law you may study. My object of posing question is to storm your brain, start your brain factory to think in this way towards the law. Is there any difference between statute and law? Or similar term? Is there any difference between statute and law? What is that? Yes. Very nice. Very nice answer. What is your name? Very nice. He has proved that he is student of Gurpur madam. Can anybody tell me a distinction between court of law and court of justice? Is there any distinction between court of law and court of justice? Court of law means court has no discretion. Court has to proceed in accordance with the provisions of law only. And court of justice means court is having discretion to exercise in favor of justice, to uphold the justice. So that is the distinction. What is superior than law? Is there anything superior than law? Is there any superior than law? Anything superior than law? Can anybody tell me one answer? Unless contract to the contrary. What is meaning of this term? Unless contract to the contrary. In Transfer of Property Act, this term is there. Yes. Very nice. What is your name? You have also proved that you are student of Gurpur madam and all faculty sitting here. Very nice. So, law is not always superior. Law is not always superior. There are some other aspects which shows that law is not superior. Because ultimate object of law is what is? What I have stated earlier is that people's good is highest law. Therefore, people can make contract for them, which may be superior than law. So that was my question. So, while making law, a very, very difficult task is to draft the law. When I was Secretary Law and Judiciary, there were so many occasions when I corrected the drafts of the laws and even amendment proposals also. So, if a statute is kept in your hand, suppose environmental law is in your hand and particular statute regarding air pollution is in your hand, what is the soul of that law? What is the crux of that law? Where is the crux of that law? Where the soul of that law lies? Can you tell? Any statute is put in your hand. In tackling problem also, in the body of that statute, I am frequently using that particular part of the statute to tackle the problem because it is soul of the law, because it is crux of the law. Can anybody tell? Definition. Definition, to draft the definition. What is the object of drafting definition? Object of drafting definition is to reach to the crux of giving justice to the litigant. Generally, object of law is, prime object of law is to cure the mischief, isn't it? Therefore, while tackling the problem, particularly when we are dealing with the statute, we have to tackle the problem with the help of definition. In most of the cases, when we are going to tackle the problem in the judiciary, we are going to search out the real meaning or restricted meaning or enlarged meaning of the definition. Why the definitions are there? One of the American author has written, who served for years together in the Law and Judiciary Department as secretary. She wrote that while drafting law, I felt that it was very difficult task to draft the definition of the law. So my request to you all is, while tackling any problem, you must be adhere with the definition of the law. This is what I tried to tell you about because this subject is very new subject for me also. When I read over it, experts are sitting here. I am also student of law, as I have stated. So the highest object of law is to prevent the mischief, control the mischief and welfare of the society. And with the help of such conclave, you will solve the social problem of unemployment. Some of you are expected to be future businessmen or industrialists, and that may be the powerful object and sole object of the conclave. And I'm very happy that I have been called here and I could put something in the form of brainstorming to you. So you will think over that we have to think in this or that way, but that is the way in which I thought that we can solve the problem. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for those insightful words. I request the student volunteers to kindly escort the dignitaries to their seats for the theme reveal video. As rightly elucidated by Director Ma'am, the theme of SLSP Conclave 2024 is enhancing legal frameworks for sustainable business, prioritizing ESG and climate action. To illustrate the significance of this theme, we will now present a brief video highlighting the pressing need for action in this area.
"77 of the world's most polluted districts are in India.
Capital City has declared a health emergency because of intense air pollution. Officials are
India is at a critical juncture. Pollution water scarcity and deforestation are threatening our environment and our future. It's time for change. Did you know that 21 of the world's 30 most populated cities are in India? Air pollution alone contributes to over 1 million premature deaths annually. Water scarcity is another pressing issue. Groundwater levels are depleting rapidly, and our rivers are becoming increasingly polluted. Deforestation is worsening these problems, leading to loss of biodiversity and accelerating climate change. Companies play a significant role in this realm. Therefore, they must prioritize ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors, and take responsibility for their impact on the environment and society. Enhancing legal frameworks is crucial. The situation can be remedied through resolutions that incentivize businesses to adopt cleaner technologies, reduce emissions, and protect our environment.
We will commence the panel discussion after a break of 2 minutes, once the stage is ready. पीछे से पीछे से ले जाओ पीछे से बैक स्टेज से ले जाओ पूरा घुमा करके ले जाओ The program will commence shortly. Students are requested to be seated. I would like to request the panelists and the moderator, Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am, to kindly take their seats on the dais. We would now like to request Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am to felicitate our esteemed panelists as we express our gratitude for their unwavering support and contribution to our event and our institution. Our panelists for the 7th edition of SLSP Conclave are Senior Advocate Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay, Senior Advocate Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay has over 3 decades of experience in the field of environmental law. He is the founder of India's first environmental law firm, the Enviro Legal Defense Firm, and has been practicing environment and development law since 1993. Senior Advocate Mr. Upadhyay served as an India Visiting Fellow at the Bolt Hall School of Law, University of California, Berkeley, and is a legal intern at the Earth Justice Legal Defense Fund, San Francisco. He has contributed significantly to the Worldwide Fund for Nature India at the Center of Environment Law. Senior Advocate Mr. Upadhyay has specialized in areas such as natural resource management, ecotourism, wildlife conservation, and biodiversity. He is consulted by renowned international, multilateral, national, and state institutions, including the World Bank, IUCN, FAO of the United Nations, UNDP, and many more. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, sir. Mr. Narendra Kumar Jain. Mr. Narendra Kumar Jain is currently serving as the Vice President and Head of Environment Corporate at Jubilant Ingravia, a global leader in life science products. His key areas of expertise include operations management, performance management, engineering, environment safety, project management, and auditing. Mr. Kumar has resource optimization expertise with 21 years of experience in the industry, with specialization in resource and environmental management and workplace safety management. He was previously the General Manager, Corporate Environment at Hindustan Zinc. Mr. Jain also held positions at Vedanta Resources, Hindalco Industries, and Advertising in India. Mr. Navneet Vibhav. Mr. Vibhav is a partner at Shadul Amarchand Mangaldas and Company, specializing in environmental advisory, disputes, and ESG advisory. He represents clients across diverse sectors such as cement, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, real estate, and chemicals before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, High Courts, and the National Green Tribunal. Mr. Vibhav was previously partner at Khaitan and Company and a managing associate at Luthra and Luthra. He is a member of the Supreme Court Bar Association and the National Green Tribunal Bar Association. Mr. Vibhav pursued BA LLB honors from Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad, and an LLM in Environment, Energy, and Climate Change from Lewis and Clark Law School, Portland, Oregon, USA. He has received numerous awards and fellowships from organizations such as BELSPO, UKIERI, Robert Bosch Foundation, Asian Development Bank, and the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change. Mr. Vibhav has been recognized by Legal 500, Forbes, and BW Legal for his contributions to environmental law. He has authored 3 books published by LexisNexis, contributed chapters to international publications, and penned columns and articles for leading publications such as Economic Times, Financial Express, The Hindu, and more. Mr. Vibhav has taught environmental law and energy law at the National Law University, Delhi, and Jindal Global Law School, Sonepat, and was appointed as an adjunct professor of environmental law by his alma mater, Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad, in March 2023. He has served as a member of FICCI's task force on ESG and is currently a member of its subcommittee on environment. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, sir. Mr. Purusharth Singh. Mr. Purusharth Singh is a partner at Kocher and Company, specializing in investments, M&A, infrastructure, energy, and projects. Mr. Purusharth Singh is a member of the Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa. Mr. Singh has over 15 years of experience specializing in structuring, investment, and commercial deals across the entire life cycle of infrastructure and technology-based projects. His client portfolio spans across diverse sectors such as energy, manufacturing, technology, finance, real estate, IT, and ITES. He assists prominent MNCs in navigating the intricate and evolving Indian policy landscape, offering tailored insights and strategies. Mr. Singh pursued BA-LLB from National Law University, Jodhpur, with honors in international trade and WTO studies. He has previously been a partner at Dheer & Dheer Associates and held the position of General Manager at Suzlon Group for 4 years and Legal Director at First Solar, both renowned names in the renewable energy sector. Mr. Singh was recognized with the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Award by Kocher and Company. He was honored as a future legal leader by IBLJ in 2023 and featured in Legal 500's recommended lawyer list in the same year. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, sir. Advocate Ms. Dhanya Mallar. Advocate Ms. Dhanya Mallar is a dual qualified lawyer, England and Wales and India, with expertise in arbitration and a diverse background encompassing shipping and electricity laws. Advocate Dhanya Mallar pursued her BA LLB honors from Symbiosis Law School, Pune, completed a master's in arbitration from Bucerius Law School, Hamburg, on the prestigious Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom and Bucerius Law School. Advocate Mallar is enrolled in the Bar Council of India and holds the title of a non-practicing solicitor in England and Wales. She has previously worked with renowned law firms like Clyde & Company, Hamburg, as a research assistant and at VJ Matthew & Company, Cochin, as a junior partner. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, ma'am. In the spirit of promoting awareness and understanding around the theme of today's event, a survey form was circulated among the students of our college and the wider public. This survey aimed to gauge the general awareness and understanding of legal regulations surrounding the theme, providing valuable insights into the collective consciousness of our community. We are now showcasing the findings and data collected from this insightful survey. Before we commence with our panel discussion, kindly allow me to elucidate on the structure of today's discussion. We commence with each of our esteemed panelists speaking for 5 minutes each on the theme or any sub-theme of their choice. Subsequently, our moderator, Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am, will ask questions to our panelists for 5 minutes each. Further, the moderator, Professor Dr. Gurpur ma'am, will conduct 2 rounds of questions, each rounds for 15 minutes each. We will culminate with an interactive audience Q&A session for 15 minutes. We now humbly request our esteemed panelists to commence with the discussion and request Director ma'am to take over the deliberations.
Thank you, Raghavendra, for that wonderful comparing. And can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Raghavendra, for that wonderful comparing. I know that you are one of the initial brains who put this conclave idea together. Our esteemed chief guest who is seated among the audience, in his own humility, he is willing to be learner today. So it really humbles us, sir. We don't know if we make mistake, please forgive us. But sir gave a very good prelude to today's discussion in looking at how one has to look at justice and law, and also the approach in terms of statutes. Today, and wherever there is no statute, then there is rationality. So today's whole discussion unfolds around this possibility of rationality as well as law and approaches to justice. We have such a rich bevy of resource persons here. It's a galaxy of legal luminaries who range from the field of actual action in Mr. Jain to the teaching and research expertise alongside practice, a 360-degree kind of completion in Navneet. And then we have Advocate Sanjay Upadhyay, who is one of the celebrated people who has used litigation as a tool of climate justice. And along with him, we have Purusharth Singh, who is also another legal luminary coming from Kochar and Company, a leader. And then we have our own Miss Dhanya Mallar, who is a practitioner who has been trained in the alternative ways of resolving disputes, among other things, in both jurisdictions of India and UK. So with such rich galaxy of expertise, we have a kind of background coming from the various stakeholders, especially the youth, because Jamuni Chair highlights the prominence of the youth, and India is standing on the threshold of 65% demography of youth who are going to be tomorrow's beneficiaries, if we are looking at intergenerational equity, who are going to be tomorrow's litigants if we spoil the climate for them. So from that point of view, the survey that has been conducted by our student body, the Conclave's Thought Circle, is a very valuable survey. I request the people who are controlling the PowerPoint presentation to look at question number 14 and display that, because that will set the prelude for our first speaker, Advocate Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay. Sir, you will have 5 minutes to 7 minutes to deliberate on your response, because for the benefit of the audience, I repeat, the themes, the whole theme of today's conclave that you were educated about in the video, in the theme reveal video, is divided into 5 sub-themes. The first sub-theme is strengthening India's ESG framework, bridging the gaps and fostering sustainability, which is looking at important principles of ESG, regulations in India, whether the law currently or the policy or the approaches or the litigation strategies, are they adequate, or how the litigation strategy addressed this inadequacy and paved the way for subsequent rules, and how we are learning from the best practices across the world, especially the Green Deal of EU, which has structured this whole sustainability framework, could also be coming in here in terms of educating our audience, some of you who are here and some of you are remotely accessing this. And then what kind of guidelines can come? So from that point of view, this question, if you see, how do you think AI and blockchain can contribute to the enhancing of ESG compliance and transparency? So setting the stage on where we stand today in terms of technological advancement, and then looking at this huge panic that is always ticking in our heart about the devastation of climate, which we saw in the video, this is the question that was asked. And you look at the response, all of them say that all these approaches are very important. It's not that one approach, but among all the approaches, the one which has more prominence is compliance process, and then improved data analysis and monitoring, which are corporate expertise coming from Navneet, coming from Narendra sir, as well as from Purusharth, along with Dhanya might highlight. But for the time being, the other question is the first question, very first question that you would have in the survey. Let's beam that. I hope this is clear to all of you. Let's go to the next slide, which is the very first slide in the series of slides. Now, the second sub-theme that is looking at is how Indian knowledge system, especially India's way of looking at nature as mother nature, and India's way of looking at Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and then wishing everybody's happiness in Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, among other things such as dharma as a concept of that balance, reinventing this balance in terms of social responsibility of every individual, and in terms of rediscovering oneself in the aranyakas, in the presence of the nature, and other approaches which have been there. That is the second theme, Indian knowledge system or Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. The third sub-theme which is looking at is how various stakeholders can collaborate, and what is the corporate accountability. Today human activity is strongly organized, predominantly organized in the form of corporate organization. So what is the responsibility of the stakeholders in that angle is the third sub-theme. The fourth is impact of financial markets and investor activism on performing such accountability or in alerting such accountability. In fact, these are not silos. In fact, litigation strategies involving NGOs plays a very important role in this kind of financial market also, investor activism also. We'll tell you the examples as we go forward. And then we have the theme of roles and challenges of AI, which corresponded with the very first slide. And there may be other insights coming from my experts. And the last two sub-themes look at how do we look at the horizon of ESG in future in terms of navigating startups, sustainable startups, the green economy, the circular economy, both in terms of supply chain and manufacturing. How do we look at it? And how do we embrace global standards? Today we are far away from global standards, as the survey itself will show you here that not question 15, we are looking at question 1. Question 15 will come at the end, please. Can you beam question 1? Yeah. So this is where we begin before Sir takes over, Advocate Sanjay Upadhyay takes over. How do you perceive the challenges for companies in integrating climate action protocols into their operation? So this is the basic question. Look at that, lack of awareness or understanding. Maximum of the respondents did not have any idea about it. Some of them say that it is resource constraint. Some of them say that it is traditional approach of justice system. Some of them say it is regulatory complexity. Very few said it is lessening profit. Did they want to be more diplomatic? We do not know. Some of them say it is very expensive. But some said wisely or safely that it is all of these reasons. So with this in the background, where 54%, a significant number, said lack of awareness or understanding and regulatory complexities are the challenges. Over to you, sir, with this background.
Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gurpur, with the permission of the Honorable Judge Sanjay Deshmukh ji, Judge High Court of the Bombay High Court. And students, thank you for this opportunity to start with. It's a very contested topic, and I'm really glad the kind of research that has gone into this entire Symbhav event. And I congratulate each one of you, students and the faculty, to really conduct this so efficiently. This is a topic quite close to my heart because I've just spent about 30 years in this space. I don't want to sound like a fossilized lawyer, but certainly this space attracts me a lot. And every 5 years, 10 years, we get a new acronym. The latest one is ESG. And when we started our career in the early 90s, a lot of these compliance frameworks started shaping up in a pretty structured way, I would say. And I remember when we first got into multilaterals, when they were really coming into India, the World Banks and the Asia Development Banks. And one of the first things that was told to us, and I was fortunate to be part of those assignments, is to develop what is called as the Environmental and Social Safeguards Framework. And this is early 90s, so there was no concept of ESG, which is now being coined. And there was a very detailed assessment of both environmental safeguards and social safeguards. And they used to become part of any loan agreement. So for example, if Power Grid has to come to India with a $1.5 billion contract with India, then the ESG framework, when it was then called the ESMF framework, that's why I'm saying every 5 years you have some new acronym, it's called the Environmental and Social Management Framework. And that was a part of every loan agreement which every multilateral and every bilateral used to sign if they had to invest in India. And if you don't follow that, there was a compliance panel that you could actually complain to sitting in Washington, DC, to tell you that your company or your investments are fraught with risks of this nature and they are not following the ESMF framework, so to speak. So this is where my learning started, because another concept, and I just wanted to place that for people who are interested in this discipline, there was something called the country systems approach, which essentially means in simple language that whatever global principles are enunciated by all these multilateral banks, and there were many, like as I said, the World Bank had its own ESMF framework, the Asia Development had its own, the International Finance Corporation had its own systems, there were Equator principles for banking system. So there were many such systems in place that came about. And one of the tools was what is called as the country systems approach, which means whatever global principles exist in the larger universe of their operation, you had to then adapt to the country system. And then they chose lawyers, and fortunately for me those days in the early 90s, to look at the country system and compare it with their global principles and come up with what is called as the safeguard analysis, and then put that in the form of an agreement which they were bound to follow. Now this is where I think the genesis of ESG, if you can call it today, was there. And then of course we had a number of legislations that are there. Most of you are familiar in your environmental law classes, the environment impact assessments and social impact assessments now under the land acquisition law, and a lot of social welfare legislations. And a combination of environmental legislations and social welfare legislation normally becomes the framework for assessment. And I think now ESG, if I have to understand the term correctly, apart from all the processes from SEBI, etc., that are there, is largely to enhance that framework and make it operational in the boardrooms of corporate governance. And I think that's the key, whether business leaders think of good environmental compliance as good business. And I think that's the crucial part, because if you don't think good environmental compliance is good business, and I'm sure Naren will tell you the kind of compliances, and if at all, even there are other kind of interests who come in litigation. But when you don't comply, or when you're seen as a non-compliant industry, the kind of costs you have to bear, apart from the mental trauma and the social trauma and the market trauma aside, is huge. So I think it's time to understand that ESG framework is not an option per se, but has to build on the existing frameworks and really move on to the business decisions of the current corporate governance framework. Unless that is done, I'm afraid we are still going to have conversations and not do something real on the ground. And I think that message has to go across the board. Small or big businesses, they have to be compliant, because something that the Honorable Judge said very, very efficiently in the morning, just before this session was, is there a legal framework that needs to be followed, or you need to go to your common sense? The fact is, if there is a statutory framework, A, understand it, B, implement it. And I think that's the key. And I think there's enough in the environmental law space that you need to understand, apart from its complexities which we deal with on a daily basis, and see that it is implemented on the ground. And that is the basis for a new ESG framework. So I'm going to stop at this and wait for the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Upadhyaya. That was a very insightful exposition of Genesis. But I still have lingering questions. Just like how in international law we speak about politics marrying the law, political exigency determining or rather justifying the deviation from the core principles of justice and law, do we have anything like business exigency and justifying such deviation, or the larger need as we saw in case of Narmada Bachao Andolan or the cases that you have defended? So in this context, I would invite Mr. Jain to respond in terms of how would you respond to the point that Sir raised in terms of good environment compliance as good business?
When I started my career in the 1994, it was in 1994, I started my career as a production man, being a chemical engineer. And in this whole hall, all of you are lawyers, and I'm the only one who is a non-lawyer, so please accommodate me accordingly. Now, being a production man and thereafter having gone into projects before coming into environment, I'm heading the environment, I've had the environment of very large companies like Hindalco, Hindustan Zinc, Vedanta, and now Jubilant, without a qualification in environment, a formal qualification in environment. It only tells you that it's from the heart, it's from the minds, and the laws. A combination of these three and the intention of doing good, which helps address the subject which we are talking. Right now, if you look at the gamut of things available on, or the framework which is there for environmental protection, conservation, augmentation, prevention, you would see most of it is focused on how can I regulate industry. Why? Because it's a profit center. Because somebody is there to make some profit is one part of it, but the other part of it, the legal, technical part of it is that it's the dispersion of environmental pollutants concentrated in one place. If you have a population of 1 lakh in a town, the total environmental load from that population could be equated to the environmental loads that may emanate from an industry. That's why catch hold of that guy, because he's a profit-making center, profit center. For whom is he manufacturing? He is manufacturing for that 1 lakh, not for himself. So, looking at industry as a villain has been the way the last 50 years of environmental governance been, rather than looking at it as a service provider. So, the problem lies with the way the environmental regulations are framed, in which when you can say technically an environmental law that came was in the form of AIR Act in 1974. Thereafterwards, the thing started, and ultimately 82 came the Environment Protection Act, 86. Now, where you talk about the word pollution control boards, the word, once you say pollution, when you use the word control, everything goes towards regulation using a stick, and there is no carrot. That's the problem in compliance. The problem with compliance is that the way not all of you would know all the laws of this country, similarly, industry also will not know all the laws of the country. So, by default, there is an assumption that if you are in industry, you should know everything under the sky. So, if you are not knowing it, then you are willingly violating, rather than thinking it's a gap in awareness. One of the survey talked about lack of awareness. It is true. So in that event, the difficulty which is faced by the industry for compliance, which is the focus point of question, is the owner of an industry or a promoter of an industry, the entrepreneur who is wanting to invest or run the industry, there is a lack of understanding or the knowledge of law. There is a lack or gap in the understanding of the solutions to the environmental issue which is emanating from the industry. When both of these are combined and suppose you fill these gaps, then the question comes about economic viability. I can reduce pollution if there is a technical solution. Then comes the question, the financial cost of it, which बोलते हैं ना कि पैसे के ऊपर का ब्याज दिन रात 24 घंटा साइकिल चलता है. So when you go to the market to borrow money to run it, not that all industrialists runs their industry with their money. And even if it is their own money, that money would have done something else if not put into industry and would have earned him some money in return. None of us would go to give a money, deposit money in a bank without interest. So why the entrepreneur should? The question now is, if there is a cost of performing to the standards stipulated by the regulator, who is using a stick because of the word control in his definition, where is the incentive for economic unviability? Because none of you sitting here for whom I am making the product would like to pay a premium for that environmental compliance. So when that happens, where does the sincerity for compliance come from? So definitely the awareness gap can be closed, the technological solutions can be achieved, financial viability becomes the problem for which violations continue. And as long as violations can be continued profitably, please understand, violations can be done profitably means the regulator who is supposed to check on me doesn't have resources to check on me or doesn't have the willingness to check on me. Till that time, violation will continue. There comes the question, what we are talking about, whether ESG should be mandated, should be regulated, should be dictated, or should be volunteer. In my last 20 years of experience, I have seen the real thrust, push, and solid practical actions on climate change has happened after the Paris Accord in 2015. When the current Prime Minister took the lead, remember till then, we were always a begging bowl. We were always looking for, oh, you give me solution, you give me money, you give me funds. In spite of we being the largest population and very well known will be the most affected when the climate change impacts really happen, because we have a very big coastal line also to talk about, and we are an agrarian economy. 80% of the population survives on agriculture, which will be the most impacted because of climate change. In spite of all this, there was no leadership to take the bull by its horn. Like the justice said in the beginning, how would you tackle a problem? I can avoid, I can push, I can reject, I can refuse, I can decide not to act. But it was 2015 Paris Accord where our leadership took a call that we will become net zero by 2070. The Solar Alliance was signed, International Alliance was signed. Thereafter, what you can see is a sea change on the approach to tackle the issues related to climate change. Huge amount of investments coming in. One problem with this ESG coming in, which I can be seeing, you know, there is a very young leader of the national political party who keeps on every stage talking about Punjipatis, 5 Punjipatis controlling the country. I don't have to name it. But please remember, the ESG guidelines will push towards it. More and more you push for ESG, which means to bring in responsibility. And for those who take up the responsibility, there are financial institutions which are going to invest in that particular company. Means what? Somebody, you and me, or a small scale company operating in a corner of the city cannot definitely access that money. That money would go, which will be at a lower interest, longer tenure of interest, which brings down the financial cost of investment for an industry, that will go to that Punjipati. Because size matters. One of the answers in your questionnaire was high cost of getting those services or complying to the guidelines. Definitely, if I today have to engage a consultant who will do the validation of my ESG compliance, and if he says the fees is 50 lakh rupees, who can afford? Obviously, who has the scale and size? Who has the scale and size? Obviously, the Panch Punjipatis which are being abused. So ESG guidelines, if it is made mandatory, it's a direction, regulation, law, the smaller players will suffer. Or the bigger players who can face it will do it, but in the process, they will take services from the smaller guys. It is called outsourcing. So this is a complex one. In my view, from an industry perspective, from my experience, the ESG is not something new. It's basically somebody is trying to codify what we have been doing for ages, what we have been doing since the first environmental law we had. Those things are being brought into a standardized template format so that there is comparability for a third party to evaluate before it decides whom to invest in. But the cost involved in doing this is so high that small players cannot do. So in my view, cost of finance is a major problem. In addition to lack of other gaps can be covered. All that you listed, other gaps can be covered. Unless it's made financially viable or the receiver is ready to pay for it, it cannot be complied with. So big guys will do it because they know the brand name has to be protected, so they will do it. Small guys will suffer.
Thank you, sir, for that. But there are 2 points of discussion here, which I'll throw open to the other 2 experts who are here, who are seeing a bigger picture in terms of advising the projects and defending the industry or facilitating compliance, let us say, structures. My question is, or the debatable point here is, are you looking at money today or loss tomorrow? So sustainability is always in 3 time frame, right? Past, present, and future. Secondly, climate is something on which whether we can put a premium in terms of immediate return, or can immediate return be the risk that we take for a long-term future of the next generation? So these larger questions as they loom, I would invite the attention to the survey where when we asked our respondents whether you are aware of the term, they were aware of the term. But then 20%, a whopping 20% in this generation, which is tech generation, Gen Z, was not aware of the term ESG. Because this seems to be more like a business term than the legal term. That means there is a structured framework which is missing in this term of art. And here, next slide, please. In the next slide, you will see how would you rate your understanding on ESG principles. And you will see that 59% of them had a very moderate understanding. That means the understanding is in the high range, nobody had. In the low and very low range, and in the moderate range only most of the respondents came. That means there is a need to create more training programs and awareness in this capacity building among the youth as well as faculty members and others. Let's go to the next one. This is about generic ESG. When it comes to law, the framework is missing or the framework is inadequate or scattered. That needs to be brought in, because in law we are talking about enforcement, whereas in compliance we are talking about internal compliance. And internal compliance as they did in CSR also, and they opened their own educational and hospitals and they channeled their fund from one pocket to the other. So this has been the way in which if you leave it to compliance alone. Therefore, ESG is something more risky if you were to leave it to one-sided compliance, and the problems of the small and micro entrepreneurs could be tackled by government incentives, by providing such framework free of cost or at a subsidized rate, open source. These could be the solutions, I think. So I would like the experts who have the experiential knowledge to come in here. Look at this question. Are you aware of existing ESG regulations in India? We are using the word regulation and law, not law, because the regulations are also again coming from different bodies, again scattered in nature. And one allegation by one of the experts is that regulations are focusing more on energy than other facets of sustainability. This is where EU Green Deal comes in, because EU Green Deal looks at a policy which is comprehensive, from mobility to the fuel use, to all other, means the energy, to lifestyle, to agriculture, and to the conservation. That kind of a comprehensive approach is that is a best practice that could be looked at. So from this point of view, only 1/3 were well aware and not the rest of them. Let's go to the next question. The next question is another interesting question. Do you think Indian regulations are adequate? Those who knew about it, they said it is inadequate, and a good percentage said they are adequate, but then that is still a minority. Let's go to the last question for this part of the discussion. Let's go to the last question. That is, do you think India should adopt global standards for sustainability guidelines and climate action? Unfortunately, sir mentioned about Paris Agreement. The ramification of the Paris Agreement at the national jurisdiction, what Upadhyay sir pointed out, it has been very, very checkered. If Europe is taking it very seriously, that's not the case in other countries, and America itself has passed its, it has not yet ratified some of these agreements. So with that in the background, 66.4 said that India should adopt global standards. I would say international best practices. And then rest of them disagreed, and they also said that India should follow its own suited principles. I agree with that, because we are global south. We may be shown as having high GHG emissions, but compared to per capita emission in the developed countries, ours is much lower. So maybe our focus needs to be elsewhere, and our policy and law need to be tweaked in that direction. So I now hand over the podium to Mr. Purushat Singh, who has been looking at some of such projects and advisory. So over to you. We would like to hear from you in the background of this. Thank you.
So, very difficult to summarize this entire gamut of discussions because it touches upon so many different facets of not just doing business, but also being a member or being a citizen of the country or the global population. Of course, there are concerted efforts now in India and abroad, and more our policies are getting in tune with global standards, but there is still a huge gap to be bridged. Of course, we've taken some initiatives, but it's a long way. It's a good, promising start, and thank you so much for making me a part of this initiative. I believe in times to come, these sessions, these sensitizing sessions are the ones that will pave the way for actual change to arrive, and not just a change that's word-centric, but in reality you can sense. That said, ma'am, and when the question was posed at me, I kind of felt that I have to defend, I have to defend sustainable goals, but having served clients in this market, oh, this is okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so we don't have a lot of time. Uh, but let's start where you left. I believe we can, I mean, this is all lip service. I'm so sorry. I'm not a naysayer, I'm not a detractor. But see, at the end of the day, we have to decide and figure out where the solution lies. Is the think tank the one responsible for driving change? No. I believe, I'm so sorry, but it sounds so commercially centric. But at the end of the day, the people who are in charge of commerce are the ones who are the decision makers. All right. So till the time you take this concept of green premium out of the equation, we will not be there where we want to be. For instance, as Sir was pointing out, I mean, if there is money available, is that money available at a premium? Who is that money available to? Is it available to just top few MNCs, global conglomerates and companies, or is it actually available to a person who's just kickstarted something, technological product or a solution, he's intending to solve a problem? Does he have access to capital? And what are the restrictions? All right. I believe that till the time the concept of risk-adjusted returns, and why are risks, I mean, how does the industry perceive at risk when a new project, let's say an energy project or a manufacturing project, right at the inception, people in a boardroom will draw out fancy Excel sheets, and run all sorts of simulations and figure out where things can go wrong, all right? And this is where the entire picture, I mean, we can have a project that runs through a course of 25 years, but at that very board meeting where where the calls were being taken, it was decided that no, the policy upheaval is too much of a risk. Access to capital is not easy. There is huge premium, even green bonds. And there are so many things that are happening. The government has taken initiatives, our bond market, our equity market, investors who have access to money, and people who are willing to lend money to not just energy products, clean energy projects, but projects that inherently further the goal of sustainable development measures. All of them, the central idea, the theme that connects all of them is, will the project make money? Will that project have access to cheaper capital? Because then everything else becomes hogwash. All right, there is an ESG norm. What does an ESG norm do? I mean, it's, as Sir was pointing out, just old wine in new bottle, and it hasn't aged well. We can have new animals and new regulations in place every day, but are we actually driving change? So when I look at ESG, it is nothing but there was a time when investment decisions were standalone investment decisions. You want to invest? Okay, these are the parameters. These are my, this is my input cost, these are my returns, and these are my risks. There was no concept of sustainability also driving development. This is the first time post-implementation of ESG, and also ESG has come a long way from BSR to now BSSR and BRSR. I mean, there's so many acronyms, and just you throw around anagrams and then you'll have a new acronym, all right? But at the heart of it, I believe yeah, it's on. All right. So basically, the economic parameters have now started coming in tune. They're now dovetailing with sustainability measures, and this is not something that is just being run or being driven. Change, this evolution happens
the results will not become common. And how will this psychological change happen? Some of it will happen through vicarious learning, through these sessions, through the through government, through policy initiatives, through laws. And that's the reason why we believe there has to be a balance between carrot and stick. Sir was talking about there's just stick, there's so much stick. What about carrot? I think it's a transition. Carrot and stick, they're both sides of the same coin. At the same time, we are moving through. We are a traditionally aggregated economy. 80% of our population still depends on agriculture. But we are slowly moving towards an economy that just does not want to become at par or come at level of a developed country, but also ensure that the future generations are able to enjoy what little we have to offer. So, quick, I think, minute to summarize the initiatives that have been taken and how we are on the way, how we've taken this road of transitions into a more greener economy. There are three basic stakeholders and also players in this entire scheme of affairs. Okay? There is policy. Policy has a political angle to it. So some of it we may never be able to address or solve. So it's always going to be a variable in the investment ecosystem policy or rather policy change. Even reluctance to policy change is going to be a factor, indecisive factor. We will never be able to fully comprehend or assess how much change or how much implication it's going to have on any investment decision. Number two is technological advancement. I believe with access to technology world over, this gap has been bridged to the maximum extent. And if there is a new technology, green ammonia, green hydrogen, new carbon capture, or emission reduction norms or measures or solutions, we have access to that in India. Perhaps the capital which makes the access easier is still lacking, but we have access to it. So technology, I believe, is something that we in time will be able to take care of. Technology providers are there, technocrats are there, they're willing to invest. Third is capital, capital markets, to say both equity and debt. This is something where the problem lies. The understanding of capital market, the understanding of investors. Are you guys able to get it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. I'll have to keep exercising my vocal cord, although my time's come to close. So these are brilliant steps. So I have the moment things land in my hand, it's okay. Yeah, I'm right at the close. So, yeah, and the largest single biggest motivator and driver is going to be public, you and me. Right? Your understanding, my understanding of what ESG is. Now, ESG is an amalgam of so many things. I'm an energy lawyer, so I serve energy clients, technology service providers. At the end of it, I used to think that the work that I do stretches or spans through so many different aspects of doing business as well as life. However, I was a naysayer of ESG. There was a time every time there's a new kid on the block, we have naysayers and you think that ESG perhaps will meet its same untimely demise as so many of its predecessors. But I have a feeling this is here to stay because there is an inherent change. There is the way of looking at things, of taking decisions, especially that can have a long-term impact. And that psychological change is slow, steady, but we're on the road. Thank you.
the litigation is going to be the challenge. But there is another facet to it when businesses are operating, how mindful they are of the local community, both in their governance and in their CSR and other issues. So here, because of this, the feeling of the respondents is that yes, businesses are accounted to see there in terms of corporate social responsibility or social impact. Majority of it is all percentage negative. Let's go to the next one. So I'm putting these because I want to set the stage to the next speaker who is an all-rounder. He has a 360-degree experience. So he'll be able to also see the scholarly side of this thing aside from the practitioner side. So next question is prioritizing sustainability and responsibility to the benefit company. Already Jain sir as well as Prashad said this too does benefit companies, and he said that it was here to stay. But what do you do? We are seeing the global reports which are saying there is something called greenwashing that is getting because once they know that companies are indulging in creating an illusion of being green compliant, and later on they violate it, as it happened in 2-3 case studies in Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Africa, a company which had its expanse there. And when the investors realized, they started pulling out, and it brought the value of the company down with the whistleblowing and other approaches. So in the light of that, if you are looking at sustainability, what are the advantages? Majority of the respondents felt it has competitive advantage, enhanced risk management and risk prevention, better access to capital and investment, which was mentioned already, which is a huge challenge, and improved brand reputation. So this response, I would like you to keep in mind. Let's go to the next one, which is about involving all stakeholders such as employees, communities, non-governmental organizations in decision-making processes and sustainable development processes. About 78% of them said yes, and a minuscule percent said that they are unsure or they said no, maybe because of still being readers and not much of practical exposure. Today's is a very good practical exposure with the case studies and experiences that is brought to the table. So with that in the background, question number 10 as well, I think it could give another dimension. That is, do you believe that integrating these climate action policies into business operations is important for sustainable development? This point already came with the earlier 2 speakers. So I would request you to reflect in the light of these on the controversial question of greenwash as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, and thank you for the very kind invitation. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. Now, I'll actually require you to kind of change the slides when I come to each of the themes, sub-themes. So before that, I just wanted to kind of maybe talk a couple of minutes about the whole ESG conversation we are having. And the reason I say this is because we have students and I want to put some context to it. Like Mr. Jain also mentioned and Mr. Upadhyay was also mentioning that, see, it's not like this is something which is drastically new compared to what has already existed. And like Mr. Upadhyay also mentioned the background to it and all of that. And there is a lot of background to it. Please appreciate that, you've had the NGRBC principles and all of that. So it's a whole lot of evolutionary process which has actually gone into it before you came up with the BRR format and then the BRSR light format and now the BRSR. All right. So see, and like Mr. Jain was also mentioning that, clearly there are costs attached to it. If you talk about compliance also, and with due respect, you have a whole lot of companies, including lawyers and the Big Four, who are making a whole lot of fortune out of it through all these reports and whatever. So be it. But see, there is a lot of positive also to this whole ESG reporting and the whole BRSR format. Now we have this tendency, we arrive at the party quite late. So this is something which has already existed in Europe. This is something which has already existed in the United States. So, so the advantage, so of course at times it's very disadvantageous also. But the advantage of arriving at the party late is you've already figured out what is the right thing to do. And I can tell this from experience because I've been a part of one of the committees where, and this was, so you see, this whole ESG conversation is like 3-4 years old. Whole lot of webinars, and I've also had a lot of opportunity to speak at these webinars and all that. Initially, no one knew anything about anything, and with due respect to everyone. So the thing is that, see, if you're talking about the statutory framework that we've had in this country, they've already addressed the E of it, the S of it, the G of it. If you're talking about governance, we've had laws with respect to white-collar crimes in this country. So this, if you talk about the BRSR format, and if you see the indicators and all of that, and also there are some leadership indicators also, the idea simply is that, so this is a format where you actually go to the regulator and tell them that how is it that your entity is actually performing on these parameters, okay? When we're talking about compulsory reporting, we're talking about the top 1,000 companies by way of market capital. So of course, the smaller entities, the small and medium enterprises come in late. I agree there is a cost attached, there is clear pressure because see, I've had this good fortune of interacting with a lot of companies and because we did a project with the US Embassy in India, where we actually kind of traveled to 5 cities across 5 sectors. And this was with respect to your climate change adaptation mitigation. And if you look at the people who are running these small and medium enterprises also, they're extremely smart people. They know what they're doing, right? And ultimately, profit maximization is the sole. Of course, I mean, there's a whole lot of people want to kind of contribute to the society, do good to the society and all of that. But ultimately, it's profit maximization. And these are not people who are I mean, if I may use the word, who don't understand what they do. So, they're very smart people. And if you talk to them, they already know what is required to be done. The question then arises with respect to technology, with respect to financing and all of that. If you see the climate change conversations also, the COP, the COPs of the world, we're still talking about technology transfer and, we're talking about financing and all of that. So we've not really moved on. Now, why there is a lot of merit to ESG reporting, there is a lot of merit to BRSR, simply because, like ma'am was also mentioning, that see, ultimately, so perception management is one thing. Second is, how is it that you're trying to distinguish yourself from your competitors? That's the second thing. Third and most important is investments. Now, one of the things I do as a law firm lawyer, is we carry out a lot of due diligences. That's the boring part of it, but there is a lot of merit to it because that's basically risk assessment. Now, if say there is a client of mine who wants to invest in a particular company, one of the things we do is we tell them that these are the risks involved. This is how you can address these risks, and accordingly they'll take a call in terms of whether it's worth it to actually invest, and do they see 5 years, 10 years down the line making money out of it, right? Now, there is a whole lot of ESG due diligence which we do. Now, that is not drastically different from what we were doing earlier, because earlier also we would check the environmental compliances. We would check the social aspects and how they are complying on these parameters. We'd also check the governance aspects. Is there any anti-corruption, any corrupt practices or whatever that they are indulging in? So nothing has changed to that extent. Now, if you see the leadership indicators, there are a whole lot of, aspirational aspects which the regulator or whatever, wants the companies to actually look into. And that has a whole lot of things with respect to environment, with respect to social aspect, with respect to governance. The idea simply is, irrespective of what you do, you should ensure that there is minimal negative impact on the environment. You should ensure that the people around you benefit in so many ways. We have, of course, ma'am was mentioning about CSR and all of that, right? We've had these concepts always. But now you're also trying to streamline these things. You've brought, if you see the standards, so we have the BRSR. Now, often clients ask us that, you've had these reporting frameworks outside India also, which have existed for quite some time. Which one should we follow? Because you have so many of them. Very simple answer is, your regulator wants you to follow the BRSR format, follow that. That has taken the best of all worlds. That has seen the TCFD and, the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices and a whole lot of things, and then picked up whatever is the best. Because, and also commenting on the teaching material, or whatever, the research material, I think it's there, which was actually shared with us. So, as I was going through this when I was coming on the flight yesterday, and one of the things I realized, see, a lot of the articles' contributions are by foreign authors. And I can tell you, see, what they are writing in terms of the challenges with respect to ESG compliances in Europe or US is very different from what you would have in the Indian context, all right? So, I mean, and I clearly appreciate the hard work which has gone into it, but see, you have to see a lot of things in context. A lot of things which may work in the US, which may have worked in Europe or may not have, it may not necessarily be the same in India. So, the good part is that, and there is a lot of thought which has gone into coming up with the BRSR format, by the way. Now, one of the things which you're talking about, because sir was talking about, the sectors and all of that. Now, there is a whole lot of effort which has gone into, and in terms of the sectoral reporting frameworks. Because now we are talking about, because see, what might be actually relevant for an IT company may not be relevant for a chemical company. So, SEBI, because a lot of, through FICCI and a lot of other industry bodies, these concerns were raised that, you are asking for certain parameters, it doesn't even apply to us. For an IT company, it may not even be relevant what is absolutely relevant for a chemical company. So now what we are going to have in due due course is a reporting framework where, you actually have these parameters basis the sector in which you operate. So what the reporting framework for an IT company may be very different from a chemical company, and similarly, a cement company or other manufacturing FMCG companies and all of that. So that's the context to it. It's coming back to just before I actually answer ma'am's questions. So see, right now, of course, we have had just the first year of compulsory reporting. So it only applies to the top 1,000 companies by way of market capital. That will go on. And like I say that, it's a time-taking process. I know as a matter of fact that a lot of companies, in fact, the ones who have actually been doing it voluntarily also in the past, they come to us to ask us questions like, this is the question, what is it that we should be writing? So there is a whole lot of confusion with respect to what should be reported in qualitative terms and quantitative terms, all right? Now, my simple answer, my simple solution to them is don't misreport. Don't write something which is factually incorrect. You may, and also if you have the information, please write it. And if you don't have it, say that you don't have it right now. Because see, ultimately what will happen is the regulator is also going to look at your data, what you reported this year and what you reported 2 years later, and then check if it cannot be drastically different from what you were saying a year earlier. So simple answer is be honest. And see, the whole purpose of ESG also is you have to be ethical in your conduct. You have to be ethical in your business enterprise. You have to ensure that be it environment, be it your society, be it governance, you make money in an ethical way. And if you're doing that, and this is not a new concept, and like Sir was saying, and Sir was also saying that all of these have been regulated through the statutory framework for quite some time. Now coming back to the question of greenwashing, because that's what ma'am was asking me. There is always a temptation. So, like I said, we are all working for, profit maximizing, making money, whatever. You always have this temptation to kind of misreport, to kind of do stuff which may not be ethically correct or may not be factually correct. Sometimes, something may not be drastically wrong when it comes to ethics, but may not be factually correct. The whole idea simply is that this bluff, and SEBI has actually created a lot of framework. Because see, one of the things like Sir was mentioning that, you have these ESG rating providers and you have these, requirement for external validators and all of that. The idea simply is that you have these third parties who actually come and give you a certificate or tell that whatever you're doing is actually correct, okay? And that is where I think there was this fear that if I am paying someone to come and actually tell or give me a certificate saying that what I'm doing is actually correct, then obviously the person is guided by the fact that, the money is coming from me. So there is always this fear that, they might actually be tempted, or I might have this influence over them for them to kind of, say stuff which may not be factually correct, but which may be very much in my favor, or which may put me in better light. Which is why there is a whole lot of precautions which have been taken by SEBI. There are a whole lot of guidelines with respect to ESG rating providers which have come in. And greenwashing, very simply put, I think it has happened because I don't want to give examples or names, but for those of you who invest in, I'm sure some of you may be, because people start investing very young. If you see a lot of these ESG funds and stuff these days, like a lot of companies are also taking money in the name of that this is very focused on environment, social governance parameters and all of that. So again, I don't want to name any of the companies, but you figure out that that a lot of the stuff which they claim may not actually be true. And if you're actually raising money from the market by promising that these are the kind of enterprise, these are the kind of businesses you're going to invest in, and this is clearly going to have a positive impact. And if you're not doing that, that is clearly kind of cheating. And I would put it very simply. So the idea simply is that irrespective of what you're doing, whether you are an entity, which has to report, whether you are someone who's actually kind of doing the audit, external or internal auditor, or anyone who's kind of investing in those companies, be very, very careful that, whatever you walk the talk pretty much. If you're promising something, you actually should ensure that that is being done. If you are not in a position to do that, just don't promise. So greenwashing, I think it's to do more with us, because I think somewhere we, the whole definition of morality has also evolved over a period of time. And I think what may be ethically correct for me or whatever may not be for someone else. So that needs to change, because of course, I think Sir was also mentioning that time that, there is a lot of subjectivity and a lot of things that we talk about or whatever. But I think that is why you have the statutory laws, and that's kind of meant to take care of that. If I could quickly, ma'am, just 2 more minutes. If those questions that you were posing, if you could just quickly change the slides, I'll just, the 4 questions, I'll just, because I had some. Yeah, so very quickly just pointed. So do you think ESG regulations in India are, so one by one, please, yeah. This is the first one? So how, You just stick to one, please, yeah? So this is the one. So how important do you believe is for businesses to be accountable for social and environmental impact of their operations on local communities? Now see, we are living in an era where you have the, the Facebooks of the world and the Instagrams of the world or whatever, like, very, so this wasn't there earlier. Now anything that happens, say, somewhere down south is reported all over. You have people writing about it, you have people tweeting. Something happens in a law firm, some partner, and this is something we were discussing yesterday, says something or does something, it's all over the place. And I see the smiles here. So the idea simply is that, see, irrespective of what you're doing, everything is out there in the open, right? And if you're talking about your impact on local communities, this is something which has always existed. If you're talking about corporate social responsibility also, that was the very idea of, something of that sort. And more than anything else, you should do it for your own good. I don't see the reason as to why, say, any, thermal power plant or whatever, which if it is located, and there are quite a few examples. Just see the kind of sports facilities, the kind of educational facilities, the kind of health facilities they're creating. The idea simply is that these are people who are actually working for them. These are people who are contributing towards their success, and it's simple common sense that you treat these people well. You ensure that their lives also improve through your profit, generation or whatever. And so I think this is simple common sense, that you have to ensure that people around you are positively impacted by whatever you're doing. Of course, you'll make your millions and crores and thousands of crores, but if you do that, if you create that positive impact, it will benefit you. And if I have to kind of tomorrow go and buy a tie or whatever, and and if I know that this silk tie or whatever is actually sourced in a way where the local artists or the bunkers or whatever are actually being benefited, even if I have to pay a premium, like an X amount of money more than that, I'd be happy to do that, because if it's not making a substantial difference. So so it's not a case that if you're actually focusing on these parameters and the impact on local operations and stuff like that, you'll not necessarily make money. You'll of course make money. You'll do a lot of good publicity for yourselves, and also you'll maximize your profits. So that's one part of it, and I see clearly a lot of merit in that. So that's happening, and I think most of the companies realize that they cannot kind of bluff around anymore and kind of get away with it. The next question. How are you prioritizing sustainability and responsible business practices benefit companies? Of course, it benefits companies for the simple reason that if you're talking about, and there are a lot of studies. So if for example, a simple idea, the due diligence bit which I was talking about, if an investor comes, they want to invest in a certain pharmaceutical company in Andhra Pradesh or whatever, and there are places which are like, notorious for the kind of pollution they create and all of that. I don't want to name it because, So the idea simply is, what will they look for? They'll simply look up as to whether the kind of, investment I'm making is actually going to benefit me in the long run. And the answer very simply is, if it's a company which is good on the fundamentals, if it's a company which is doing its business ethically, which is kind of ensuring that all its so-called, the vendors and all the people who are working with those companies are also being treated well, they're doing things ethically and all of that, then naturally there is no reason as to why they'll kind of do something, they'll falter in the future and kind of have any kind of risks. Because one of the things we do as a part of our lawyer work is kind of assess the risks and try and identify as the manner in which we could address those risks, right? So when you're talking about prioritizing sustainability and responsible business practices, and that's where the S and G of it also comes in. If you see the BRSR format, and please do look, I think most of you are in the second or third year, because I'm pretty sure those are the ones who turn up when it comes to a captive audience. The senior ones don't turn in. But what I'm saying is, when you have the time, please look up the BRSR format. There are these 9 principles, and if you look through it, it's so obvious, it's so straightforward, it's simple, plain logic, like Sir was saying earlier, right? And there is no reason as to why any company would not want to do that. Of course, there are these leadership indicators, what they are expected, what you are expected to do over and above what the law requires you to do. And that is, of course, something which will put you in better light, compared to your contemporaries. Like I always tell students that, there are so many students studying law, but if you write that one research paper or, have 5 publications of in a mood, that is what presents you in better light compared to your contemporaries.
Navneet,
Similarly, it applies to companies also. Yeah.
To the points you're telling, suppose there is a company which is attracting investment, or which is collaborating with the European company, which is strictly following the Green Deal and sustainability framework. And let's have 2 hypothetical situations. One is that it is engaging in something like a pharmaceutical manufacturing, and it recruits its employees on a false promise, or it recruits them and then deviates from the kind of regulations in labor law. This could be one hypothetical situation. The second hypothetical situation is the names and private data of those people is out in the media,
Yeah.
or out in public.
Yeah.
So it's violating two important norms of sustainability framework of social as well as governance. How would such a compliance be reported as a law firm by you or your researcher?
No, so very simply put, I think the simple answer to your question, ma'am, is if there is some kind of investigation, or like you said, now that person could be a whistleblower, that person simply could be someone who's gone and complained now against that particular company and the malpractices or whatever. The idea simply is there is no way in which you kind of name and shame that person, whatever, because there are internal, and by the way, very simply put, if you're talking about the ESG compliances also, and if you see the BRSR format and the questions, now there are a whole lot of internal policies you're supposed to be having in the company also. And the very idea of having these policies is to address these kind of issues. So if there has to be a clear policy with respect to internal reporting framework, ethics, how you treat a whistleblower and all of those things. And the
very good point, but as a lawyer advising them or law firm advising them, how many times just for the investment you have developed these policy papers and made their books to look good?
No, so you're
and
right.
how do you ensure that they comply in their operation?
I'll tell you very honestly, ma'am. Now, so this assumption, because I'm also asked this question many a times that, that you are a lawyer, of course you work on environmental issues and stuff, but you represent the other side, which is the companies. And my very simple answer, I think Purushat also touched upon that aspect. As lawyers, we are professionals. We've studied law, we've studied our professional ethics and all of that. And our job simply is to interpret the law in a certain way that suits or may not suit my client's interests. The idea simply is if I have the skill set and if I have those necessary skills to interpret the law in a certain way before the court of law where I win an argument, why not? And there is nothing like a wrong side. It's a very, very wrong notion. And I say this with all humility and politely that, because, so, and Sir would appreciate this, that, a lot of people, and I've had this occasion where someone has actually told me, oh, but you are a different kind of environmental lawyer. And what does that mean? I mean, I, as someone who represents companies on a daily basis, I'm actually doing more good. And I say this with all humility, I'm doing more good for the environment, more good for this earth, because I'm telling the companies what is the right thing to do. I'm telling them what is the right thing to do and how is it that you're supposed to be doing this, because this is what the law requires you to do. So raising, hangama khada karna bada aasan hota hai, but then the idea simply is trying to find a solution, guiding them and telling them what is, and see, the point is like Sir was mentioning that, there is a whole lot of cost attached to a lot of these compliances. Now, who is actually going to convince these the companies that doesn't matter, even if you beg, borrow, steal, do whatever you want, but if it is a requirement, you have to do it. So it's people like Mr. Upadhyay, me, Purushat, we are the people who are doing this for the simple reason that we tell them what is the merit attached to it, why you should be doing this. And if you do this now, the benefit of this may come 3 years later, 4 years later, but when it comes, it will be a huge, huge benefit. And the whole idea, see, why I always say this whole thing about ESG and BRSR also, because even if you're not falling in the category of top 1,000, and that also kind of answers Sir's questions in some way, let's see, you may not be required to kind of report compulsorily at this stage, but the BRSR is the holy Bible for you, because that kind of helps you put your house in order. It helps you prepare for the next 5 years, 10 years or whatever, right? And if you're doing that right away, see, you may not have the money right now, you may have it 2 years later or whatever, but the idea simply is if you've started doing this right away, you'll be so much better prepared 5 years later when it becomes mandatory for the next 1,000 companies or total 5,000 companies. So that's the thing. And to answer your question, ma'am, what I do as a lawyer in terms of, at least I'm talking about myself, the idea very simply is, one, this is the law. The client always asks, sir, okay, I understand that this is the law, but what are the companies actually doing? That's a very standard answer. Like, and also people will also ask you these questions that what is the way around it or whatever. The idea is that, see, as a lawyer, of course, understanding the law is one part of it. And also after a certain point in time, you also understand how business is conducted. So it's very likely that I might tell them that, this is, or I might know something which is, I know as an insider that which is blatantly wrong, which will absolutely land them in trouble. But then I just tell them that, look, this is why you are in actually, sorry for using the word, deep shit, and which is why you should actually kind of ensure that you do the things right. And I think no lawyer who's worth anything will ever kind of say anything which is unethical or legally incorrect to any of its client, unless it is someone who's absolutely kind of inexperienced or trying to do something which is, so I don't think any lawyer who even has like 3-4 years of experience will ever do anything of that sort. So I think that answers your question, ma'am. And I think, was there any other questions left? Like, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sorry for taking very long. Yeah.
Shall I give
Excellent response. We'll just give little chance to Ms. Dhanya. Dhanya, we would be very interested in knowing your response to question number 11, please. Question number 11. What are the possible approaches in terms of question number 11? He answered already, but being a specialist in this area, having qualified certain certifications, we would like you also to respond to this part. But most important is question number 12, which is looking at what could be the government's role, or what should be the role of the government? Is it only community outreach program, or fair labor practice, or supporting local development projects, stringent enforcement? I mean, we are against it. I mean, we saw the sense that we should allow the evolution, but facilitate as experts, and then establishing legal framework, which is very vague now and scattered, and rewarding the tax deduction, what sir was saying in terms of financial incentive, which flows to the customer ultimately. So what are your views and your experience by watching, although you come predominantly in terms of working with the shipping industry and other things, what are your observations?
After speaking after so many people with so much depth of knowledge, I think I will start with the most basics. In Reddit, there is a thread called Explain It Like I'm 5 years old. So that's one of the most popular threads on Instagram and Reddit. So what is ESG? Basically, now we have talked about frameworks, disclosures, all the laws which have come about it, which have to come in the future, what was happened in the past. But what exactly happens when a company is taking ESG measures, or they are going to comply with this? So we're going to start from there, and then I'm going to come to this question, because then I'm going to tell you how law and change, how they are interconnected. So what happens before you do these disclosures is a company, let's say a farm or a chicken business, poultry. What they do is they assess their risks. They see, okay, what are the material risks we have? Let's say climate change. Does climate change really affect chicken business? Can chicken survive in like really hot climate? Will they get food? What happens then? So what we think is, okay, this is the risk, climate change, drought. If my chicken is not getting water, my chicken is going to die. I am not going to be able to refrigerate it. So you identify these things, and then you check how does it financially affect my business. So end of the day, it's about making money. Now what the law does is, gives you push to think about these things. Otherwise, what will the government have to do? It will have to make laws with every single aspect of your business. Now, for example, shipping. They're already making laws about fuels. They're saying, okay, you can only use 0.5 sulfur percentage in your fuel. But now they put a ESG framework, and they tell the shipping company, okay, this is what we want. We want you to tell us how are you tackling these problems. We are not going to tell you what to do. They are doing it still, but they still want the companies to be proactive, identify these risks, and take measures. So what happens then? That's where the innovation comes. That's why the best minds, business has the best minds. We have to agree. We are all side players. What we do is facilitate them to do business. They are, end of the day, who are creating innovation. They are the torchbearers of change. Everything is coming from them. So what happens? They are thinking, okay, I have to make a disclosure. I have this much carbon credits. EU ETS allows me this much carbon credit, this much, how much is my allowance? Now, how do I fit it all into this so that I don't have to pay more for these allowances? How do I make profit out of that? They come up with new solutions. Now, what happened in shipping industry? They have come with a methane as fuel. For ships, Laura Maersk, a huge ship is running on methane. So what is happening? It's driving innovation. So what laws does? That brings me to this question. What role should government play in ensuring corporate accountability towards environmental principles? Now if we take a, like I said already, do we want government to bring 100 laws? Because if there are 100 laws, the compliance cost will be very high. Lawyers are not cheap. We agree to all that. Sir has pointed out how you will have to pay 50 lakhs for somebody else to audit it and say, this is how much it is. So if there are 100 laws, you need that many lawyers and auditors and CS and CAs to sit on it. So what do? You reverse the process and say, you do it internally. But what we want to see as government is, what are you doing? What are your measures? We have Paris Climate Agreement. We have a goal, 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is our goal. Now you help us achieve this without us hand-holding you. This is what the governments are trying to do. Some governments go a step ahead and give a little more push saying, okay, we are going to step out of our territory also. That brings me to European laws. There is one which is going to be tabled in 2 weeks in Europe, that is Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. That will have far-reaching effects, and Germany already has a law called German Supply Chain Act. What it does is, it asks you to ensure that you have complied with all the environmental, social, governance rules within Germany, and then you take care that your supply chain is also clean. Now this brings me to the point, this is where smaller companies come into picture. Now my poultry business, chicken, I'm a small company, I'm selling only that many chickens. I don't fall under the purview of German Supply Chain Act, which requires 1,000 employees now, or the CSR initiative of EU, which will come into force hopefully in next 2 weeks, April 24th, when it gets tabled. That requires 450 million or some threshold like that. I will not fall under these categories. But what is the indirect effect on me? That big company which is going to be affected is going to ask me to give them a disclosure. Do you have human rights compliance? Are you doing environmental law compliances? What are the measures you are taking? So what is happening? They're decentralizing the implementation. Instead of government being one point of contact and saying, I'm going to stand here like a principal and make sure that each of you do it, or like a class teacher, it's going to say, I'm going to be the top body and I'm going to delegate it to all of you smaller players to take ownership of your business. Ownership to ensure that you are addressing risks like climate change. Now, it's not all about, oh, we want to be so good, we want to give a better climate to the... We of course want to do it, but end of the day, it is all about money, like sir has said. Everybody has pointed out in different words. End of the day, business runs on money, everybody wants to make profit. So that's where we start thinking, where is the profit coming in from? Why should smaller players comply by ESG standards? One, investment. Like everybody has pointed out. Investments, they also take sustainability into consideration. There are UN principles of responsible investing. Only 20 investors in India have signed it as far as I know. But who knows, tomorrow there will maybe more. Or those 20 investors might be one of them who's interested to invest in you. It doesn't harm you in the short run to comply. If you start it early, it's going to be cheaper. For example, you have been running company on, let's say, a law firm. Let's take law firms. We are very paper heavy. You go to a law firm which is 20 years old, you will see huge stacks. If you go to litigation chambers, there will be one room full of dusty files. From 2004 file, I had a 1995 file which I had to argue once. Trust me, I had to pluck the papers and argue. They're paper heavy. Now if we tell that we have to digitalize all this, the firm will have to employ at least 2 people to sit and scan all this. When you start off the business, if you had done this, if you had started the practice that, okay, now we have scanners, from let's say 2010 we have scanners or 2006 we have scanners. If they had started digitalizing at that point, the salary of those 2 people to sit and scan could have been saved. At that time, it would have been a one-time investment. So ESG is not just about short-term investments. Of course, there are short-term costs which are associated because BRSR, you need lawyers. It's such an extensive framework, or GRI, whatever frameworks are, you need experts to come in. But if you invest it early enough as a small company, as a small business, in the long term, it will pay off. Now there are surveys which are saying that if you have actually done this, it brings in profits. Because when your competitors are hit by climate change and their chickens are dying, your chickens are healthy because you have figured out that you need rainwater harvesting and you need fodder within the business. You have created a circular economy within your business. So your chickens of your opposite house is dying and your chickens are running around happily waiting to be made KFC. So that is how ESG works in long term for you. Now what about the cost? I mean, costs are cost. You, as a small business, every penny matters. Your cash burn rate is your nightmare every day. Every morning you wake up and think, hey, where am I going to get the money to pay for my employees, for my rent and all of that? So where does this come into picture? That's where AI and all of these come into picture. They help you cut the costs. That 50 lakhs you're paying to auditor, if they start using climate risk assessment softwares like that has NASDAQ has, there are a lot of softwares which have come into picture. What it does is, it does risk assessment for you. So you tell it all the data, you give it the data, it helps you assess your risks. And not only that, it also helps you the climate change. For example, I come from a place in Kerala, which is close to the coastline. Now, a Peruvian farmer went and said his house got flooded because of climate change. Now, will my house get flooded? I don't know. But if I feed the data to the AI, that will be able to tell, is climate change a real risk for me in my village? Or should I be more concerned about drought because the rain has been reducing? So it gives you, let's say, near accurate predictions at least, and cuts down the cost. I don't have to engage a team of 10 climate analysts or such scientists to tell me, because there is a software developed by somebody, which in long run I'm hoping that would be cheaper, which will help. So what the government can do is probably incentivize using such technology, making it more accessible to companies so that there is positive enforcement. It's always better when you tell a child, eat the rice, I'll give you an ice cream. Instead of standing with a stick, she's not going to open her mouth. She's just going to create more, she's going to, no, I'm not. There's going to be resistance. Offer something positive, they will come grab it. So governments, if they step into the shoes of a parent and say, okay, I'm going to try the gentle parenting style. Right now, everybody is adopting and giving you positive enforcements. Then the ESG is going to create more opportunities. You have better reputation among your clients, because as clients also, we are also tired of using products which cause skin cancer, this cancer, that cancer, the heat, everything. So as clients also, we are turning into more woke as generation. Now that brings me to greenwashing, where the government is again stepping in. Now the Ministry of Consumer Affairs had published rules 2 weeks ago and had called for comments. I think the last date was March 21, where they defined what is greenwashing in advertising, where it says you simply can't go and call any product organic. I simply can't say these flowers are organic just because I've cut it organically. What if in the supply chain there was one more factor which was not organic? So that's where the government comes in to make sure that nobody is fooling others. You play by the rule, you play fair and square. Now, of course, there will be people who don't play fair and square, but that's where litigation and civil action and remedies come into picture. SEBI will come and take action. Now, if you look at Europe, there have been cases where senior women of Switzerland have gone and sued European states saying, hey, you didn't take care of the weather. That's why we are suffering so much as older people. You have to take a measure. On Tuesday, they're going to give that judgment, European Court of Human Rights. So 3 sets of people, one set from Switzerland, the older people, younger people from, I believe, France have said that our anxiety is increasing because we are so scared of this climate change and the effects. And there is one set of youth from Portugal also. So you have these remedies to make sure that if somebody is not playing fair and square, then they are taken into account. Which is also scary. As a company, I don't want to be paying so much money for litigation, the cost, and the damages. So I think that brings me to the conclusion of the questions and answers. I hope I explained it like your 5-year-old.
Wonderful, Danya. Thank you very much. In terms of responses from the panel, I think Mr. Jain wants to respond. But before that, I have one more question for you. It's the beginning of the cycle from the other end. What do you think if our students were to be internship ready or job ready in the future sustainability job arena, or skills in terms of working with the law firm, be ready with?
It's a very new field, ma'am. So I do not have diploma courses and such courses to advise to say, okay, go do this ESG course. But I think one of the most important, okay, I was louder than the mic. So one of the most important things you can do as students is understand how businesses work. Yeah, now it is working. Yeah. So one of the most important things you can do is understand how businesses work. So let's say if you're in shipping, it's important for you to understand what is the process. Or let's say if you're into offshore wind farm construction, you have to understand what are monopiles, how are they installed, what happens if something goes wrong, where does it help you? Because then when you read the sustainability reports, you'll at least be able to connect. End of the day, you have this important skill is you comprehend what you're reading. If I don't know any of these business nuances, I'm simply reading a case about a ship colliding into something else, I'll not understand what is port side. I'll not understand what happened to the mast. I have to know what they are. So whatever it is, start with reading at least few business industries where ESG is becoming more prominent, like the energy sector. Start understanding. That's where your basic A is there. Okay, what is the business? What are the risks? Then you step on to read the umbrella terms. Like, the umbrella laws, like the UNCCC. You read about the COP27. You read about task force on financial disclosures. So once you read this, at least you have some idea. Then you boil it down to more specific questions. And in the end, I think you will find somewhere something interesting. I find ESG and disputes very interesting. I find how ESG is coming into arbitration and what are the case laws which evolve in it. Because I am always inclined to disputes. You might find disclosures and due diligence more interesting. Maybe you are that kind of person. So when you boil it down, by the time you do internship, you will get to, that's the best part about internships, right? You get to try out. You get to go to due diligence and try that out. You get to come to a firm which works with shipping and you get to see this industry. So you develop an inclination and develop that skill set. So I think that's one way to go about it.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And I would like rest of the panelists to respond. Jain sir first. Yeah.
She made a very good, the way she spoke, it was very good. Thanks for that. Since looking at we four of us are at least quite a few decades into our profession, so we spoke something probably was flying off the heads for many of you youngsters. But I will try to tell you two defining moments in my life. Give me that 5 minutes for the benefit of these young students here, which will explain what is happening, if not directly, but you should be able to correlate what's happening in this ESG journey. I started my career in '94 and I was with a company which was a Canadian subsidiary. So that was a company which was 70-year-old, which has gone through 3 generations before I joined that company, which was named Indian Aluminium, which is now Hindalco. That had a tradition that after somebody stays with the company for 2 years, in the 3rd year, they would be given lots of training for capacity building. I had a good HR head. He gave me one of my learnings in my lifetime. I always remember him, MBS Shastri. He said, when a training program is done, and if you have 100 audience, he said, Jain, I used to be, and I still am a very good trainer. I take hundreds of training programs. I must have trained tens of thousands of children, professionals. He said, at the end of a training program, do not expect more than 15% of the people to understand less than 50% of what you have said. So if we are 100 people here, whatever we are talking, 15 of you may understand 50% of what we have spoken. Then he said, the second statement, do not expect more than 3% of the people to follow what you want them to do. That told me what it takes to change the culture and behavior of a generation of people. So somewhere there came something called education, training and awareness. That was in '96. Please remember these dates I am talking. First time I went abroad was in 2005, which was a sponsored program by the Swedish government, where people from 30 people from different South Asian countries were called to Sweden for a 4 weeks program. And that was on solid waste management, 2005. Of the 30, 29 of them were all government servants. I was the only one from India. I was an industrial worker. Okay? The very first day of that program, what happened, an incident I am sharing with you, changed my life. The previous day was a Sunday, so a Bangladeshi, a Pakistani, two Sri Lankans and myself and a Nepalis, we went out on the streets in Gothenburg, the city in Sweden. And while crossing the road, we just saw a pole over there with a red light and a switch button. One of the Bangladeshi guys, he had gone hundreds of times abroad, so he said, road cross करना है तो बटन दबाओ, लाल बत्ती हो जाएगा, गाड़ी अपने आप रुकेगा, तुम जाओ क्रॉस करो, एंड देन वहां जाके बटन दबाओ, ग्रीन हो जाएगा, देन गाड़ी चलेगा. तो मेडलिंग अराउंड, हम भी देखा रोड खाली है, 2 बार दबाया, बंद किया. देन स्टेप्ड ऑन टू द, बिकॉज मैं फर्स्ट टाइम गया था, so I stepped onto the road. All of a sudden there was a screeching halt of a car, which I had not seen when I was doing all this, but then वो गाड़ी खड़ा किया. गोरा आदमी है, हम पीछे भाग गया, भाई तुम जाओ. That guy did not go. वो खिड़की से मुंडी बाहर डाल के बोला, you step first, you go. So until we all crossed, he did not cross. ठीक है, we went there, thank you, निकल पड़े. He still did not go. Then what happened? He got down from the car, went to that pole and pressed that button again. क्योंकि मैंने लाल दबा दिया था, I did not convert into green when I went there. So he came back, pressed that green, and then he left. I was shocked. next day, the first day of the session, so it was a gathering where the classes were to start. The coordinator asked, you were here for the last 2 days, any experience you want to discuss, anything to share? बाकी सारे सरकारी नौकरी वाले थे, तो obviously सरकारी नौकरी वाला बात नहीं करता है, तो as an industry I spoke. I spoke and I said, this is what happened to me yesterday. Please tell me, how is that your people are so good? The answer she gave changed my life. It further strengthened some of my beliefs, but it changed my life. And why that change is a success story for me today. She said, Mr. Jain, we were like you in your countries about 100 years ago. जैसे आपके देश में गाड़ियाँ चलती फिरती रहती है, ठक्का ठुक्का चलता था, we were also like that. In spite of being such low population and such high income rates, it took us 80 years to become what we are today. So, now that you countries, that the countries which were represented there, Southeast Asian countries, which has very low income levels, very low education levels, and aspirations are high, when you start trying to aspire to become like us, that means you will have lot more impact on environment, especially solid waste. I told you the program was solid waste management. So, the Swedish government, she said, every year, park some money to train the developing countries, call them to their countries and give them training so that once you go back home, you are the messenger of change in your country to influence the people over there to change their behaviors. Now, this is in 2004, and the first incident I told was 1996. Now you correlate these two, my HR had told me not more than 3% of the people you train will practice what you want to practice. And she says 80 years it took for them to become like this. And the sentence she said was, since we took 80 years, if you people in India and the other countries who are representing have to become like us, you may take 400 years. So to cut down that time, we bring you here as to develop you as messengers of change. So this was 2005. And believe me what I'm saying, practically I've seen, I saw those practices being pushed forward in this country after 2014, when the string laws came in terms of solid waste management rules, then it came electronic waste management rules, battery waste management rules, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, toilets everywhere, all these programs, when I started looking at them, I could correlate what I heard in 2004 in Sweden and then correlated with what I was told by my HR head in 1996. And let me tell you, last 20 years since 2004-5, when I went to that abroad trip, it's 19 years, I am a crusader in the companies which I have worked to change the behaviors of my people right from the CEO level to the chaprasi. And to an extent that my CEO doesn't dare to do something wrong when I am around on environment. And while I am talking to all of you here, there must be at least 10 people in my company who must be conspiring there how to get NKJN out of this company. Because he is breathing under our necks. That's the kind of passion you need to bring change. So now why I told you these two stories is that all this ESG which we are talking about, who is pushing them? If you have heard all of us talking, many of the investing Europeans, Americans are trying to push this behavioral change in India, which is now targeting to become $10 trillion economy, third economy. And if we do not bring this change, then the climate change impacts are bound to happen. So in my first round, I told you Paris Accord and the target taken by India to become net zero carbon by 2070 is two defining moments in my life, the third defining moment. And I am happy that this happened in 2015 because you people, when you grow a bit more older, like her, then like him and like me, you will be breathing in a developed country. So the change, what I'm trying to say is, all these efforts which you are putting and all this research work which you have done, And all the parameters which you have identified as weak areas and strong areas are all relevant. Some of them, as somebody said just now, she said just now, it may look irrelevant when in 2010 or 2006, whoever started a company did not scan all those documents. And in 2024, it has become a nightmare for him because he has to invest money, infrastructure to scan all of them while continuing to run the business which is already built. So the problem of financing, what I talked about, that is company is up and running. Every rupee I get, I would want to increase my production, because only when I increase my production and output is what I go to earn more profit. In this process, there is somebody pushing me to invest some money to reduce my environment footprint. There is somebody who is coming and say, okay, ESG, in the governance part, you must now increase the women in the organization because diversity is important. So that is governance part. So lots of social part, sorry. So lots of such things are, and then all of a sudden somebody wants you to become very transparent and everything which you did not want to say. So there will be jijak. Because the minute I start disclosing, there are lots of people with black coats and you're all going to wear black coats. Somebody will come to you and say, iske upar ek case thok. So the fear is of that.
That is so true. I mean, if I may just chime in so that we can extrapolate it to the theme of the question.
So
which
thanks
is
for that 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was for the benefit of the
You were very
student.
passionate,
No,
so
that
you
is-
took little extra, it's all right.
That is so inspiring. Without further ado, the idea here is that they should create value for you. All right. If ESG is here to stay, can you monetize it? As you professionals, can you resort to it? Can you make some money out of it? I believe yes. However, if you think that ESG in itself is something that you can study and excel at and then make money, you couldn't be farther from the truth. The fact remains that ESG is subservient to a lot of various other practice areas. So you'll have to first study those practice areas. For instance, this genesis of all lies in project development. So you have to understand how project development happens. Any project development happens through series of documentation. So you'll have to read those documentations. For instance, FIDIC. FIDIC lays down the structure, the basics, the elemental pieces of how a document is drafted, you know, the chronology of so FIDIC contract is one. This is project development aspect of it. So project has two life cycles. So one is pre-commissioning and then post-commissioning, which is the operations and maintenance part of it. So you must understand what are these commercial documents that regulate the parties' conduct pre-commissioning and post-commissioning during the operations and maintenance phase. This is one. Number two would be how you finance that project. Because at the end of the day, somebody is putting money. Now, finance could be in form of equity and debt. So the person who brings in the initial contribution is the equity contributor. Basically, the original shareholder or the promoter or whoever is the person who's building that company or that product. So shareholders agreement, all right? Share subscription agreements. These are basics. These are things that they'll follow you everywhere, regardless of where you go. If you're in a shipping company, at point in time, you'll have to read SHA documents. So you please get well versed with investment documents that are shareholders and share purchase kind of documents. And then number three are the actual financing part of it, which is lender centric. When a lender believes this is a bankable project, what are the terms basis which I can fund this project? So those lending documents, term loan agreements, and then the security documents, because if you're taking loan, you have to give some collateral against it. So what are those basic documents? Everything at the end of the day will boil down to documentation. If you are wary of reading, then this is not cut out for it, because ESG is, again, ESG is going back to the original idea. ESG in itself is nothing. ESG is just an amalgam of so many little things. So basics we'll have to cover, and then you can super specialize in ESG.
Thank you very much. This is very, very useful. If any of the panelists want to have just one sentence each, as we display there the final takeaway from this, because we want to give at least 5 to 10 minutes for students. So any speaker, just quick 1 or 2 lines comment, please.
Just 2 sentences, actually. I've heard so much today. They say good lawyers should speak less outside courtrooms. Two messages. One is when we look at environmental compliance, the environmental compliance in this country is not cheaper than non-compliance. The moment you make environment compliance cheaper than non-compliance, compliances will happen. That's one. The second is a very interesting incident that happened day before yesterday. A company was showing off in the courtroom saying, I'm ISO 9001, I'm ISO 14001, I'm ISO 45001, I'm ISO 50001. And a judge very innocently asked, so why did the accident happen? And there was no answer for that very eloquent lawyer. So I think somehow we, and that brings to the question of greenwash, let's really be honest when you're talking about environmental compliance, and let's be pragmatic, because most often in our perception game, we try to give such a green picture about how good we are, we forget how pragmatic we should be. And I think that's the bottom line. Unless you are honest in your opinions, in your submissions that yes, there are issues which need to be tackled, we are still going to talk about new frameworks and non-compliance. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Any last comment?
So why don't you go ahead and then, yeah.
I blanked out, sorry. One final message is, now we are at still nascent stages of ESG. So as a student, I think we have very less to read right now. So better start reading right now so that in the future, when it builds up, you know it from the beginning to whole journey. So sir has so many years of experience, has told us about how from 1995, 1990s, how he's been reading. So for us, right now is the time we pick it up and start reading. So tomorrow when this is the main law, this is when all the players are playing by these rules, we are also aware of it. Even if we are not super specializing, the awareness of just this practice, and tomorrow some of us might work in the government where we will be able to advise the government. At that time, all of these principles will be at the back of your mind somewhere and will be able to facilitate the change and be the change.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
So my simple advice to you all is, see, like Purushat very rightly said, see, I would say that these, when you talk about ESG also, like he said, that, you know, it's a little bit of a lot of things. And so my simple advice to anyone who's studying a 5-year law course is just focus on the fundamentals. Your course is structured in such a way that, because if you're talking about ESG also, you're talking about the environmental laws. You're of course talking about a whole lot of labor laws. You're talking about, you know, laws with respect to, you know, governance, white collar crimes and a whole lot of things. And this happens over the course of your second, third, fourth year or whatever, right? So all my simple, and see, don't get very overwhelmed by everything that maybe, we discuss as a part of the panel, because a lot of things, you'll cross the bridge when you get there. And the very simple advice that I have for all of you is work hard, do your basics right while you are in law school, read things out of interest. See, if you're actually interested in something, it doesn't matter whether what I tell you or someone else tells you, you will eventually, because you have access to such amazing resources, you know, great faculty members, you'll figure out what is it that you should be focusing on, what is it that you're interested in, what is it that you think, sometimes, you know, we do a lot of things out of, certain, one is out of interest, and also because, see, I started off my career, and of course, slightly digressing, sorry for that, ma'am. So I started my career as, a corporate lawyer doing a lot of banking, and then I got into energy and a whole lot of things working for firms. And then environment always was an interest area, because, you know, my dad has been a professor of zoology, and I grew up watching animals and nature and whatever, all that. So eventually, you know, if you're interested in something, you'll get pushed towards it. And then, you know, I go for my master's, I always had the option of doing something in a more commercial area of law. I studied environment, energy, and climate change. And then when I started working for law firms, none of the law firms had an environmental practice. And so the thing is that if you're just focused, if you start reading out of interest, and trust me, in 5 years of law law school, you should be doing a lot of reading. Not just with respect to what your syllabus is and your exams, the exams, what is going to be asked, also out of interest. And be selective in terms of what you read, what newspapers also you read. So a simple example, I am an environmental lawyer, I focus on environment, but are you telling me that the only thing I read is about environment? No. I read ET every morning. So it has a lot of business news. When you're advising these companies, you also know what is the kind of development which is happening in various sectors. So read a lot of general stuff, read stuff out of interest, and eventually you'll figure out whether you want to be an ESG lawyer, you want to be a tax lawyer, a project finance lawyer, or whatever. So keep the slate completely open, be open to all kinds of possibilities, and by the time you finish your 5th year, and not just 5th year, I think, when you've worked for 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, you also kind of gradually discover as to what is it that you are interested in, what is it that you're actually good at. And that is a time-taking process. So that will happen. But just stay sincere and use your time well. That doesn't mean that you make your law school life miserable and don't enjoy the parties and the concerts. Do that also. But yeah, your competition is extremely, extremely high right now. When you are a student, much more than what it was when we were students. So just make sure that you use your time well during these 5 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Navneet. It's a very valuable advice, and I thank all the panelists for sharing their experience as well as advice to the younger generation. I must invite the attention of everyone to this last slide, which depicts the last question which was involved in the survey. It is asking about how are these various challenges to be addressed in order to facilitate smoother adoption of ESG practices. Most of the points have been covered by the panelists, which is also reflected here, supporting R&D, collaboration, strengthening legal framework, financial incentive, implementation of clear industrial regulation, and most of all, what is relevant to us, what we could do, and what should be done within the education system is educational campaign and training. One point which Upadhyay sir mentioned could be covered in the financial incentive is that reducing the cost of compliance in comparison to the expenses involved in non-compliance. Now with that, we throw open the issue to the audience. If anybody has a specific question directed to any of the panelists, please feel free. We are already late, but we can entertain a couple of questions just to make it more interactive. And before that, I'm a little curious, how many of you are investing in stock market? How many of you invested in green energy, made a profit recently? You are anyway seasoned corporate, but see the youngsters there. So this is how you watch the movement and you see that the green dimension is emerging, and with the climate change, as Dhanya beautifully highlighted with such a simple way of getting the complexity into the discussion, said that how climate change is a risk and it's also an opportunity to mitigate and adopt. So adopt in terms of directing our investment, directing our innovation, and our personal life and choices as well. As she said, adopt green in lifestyle as well. So over to you, please.
Excuse me, ma'am. My question is myself, Aditya Pathak from second year. So as the sir has rightly said, that the ECG's initiative and the climate action policies are very different from what what the America or the Europe has experienced from that of India. So in a country like India, where the regular day-to-day life is very much impacted or influenced by the government's intervention and also of the policy-making class, which is highly of bureaucratic, and they are not very much technocrats of understanding the regular peculiarities of climate justice and action. So how can be the judicial take-on point can happen for initiating non-state actors taking more of realm of taking climate action into the much serious note as it has been impacted from today's time. So how can the non-state actors and the NGOs or the private personalities also take on to the climate preservation or the climate justice taking into much higher point?
Thank you. We got the question. All of you keep your question to the point, please.
A very simple answer to that is, I think so. I think your comment and then your question boils down to two things: how can non-state actors, especially say NGOs and of course individuals, make a difference? The very simple answer to that is in terms of the choices you make. So if individual choices in terms of, because see, ultimately we are also consumers, right? So if I have to kind of buy a product, I should be very careful or mindful in terms of what is it that I'm buying, and what kind of positive or negative impact that particular company which manufactures that product makes. Okay. Similarly for NGOs also, I think, I don't want to say this, but unfortunately a lot of environmental activism in India also is seen as something which is out of vested interest. I would not want to make that kind of a generalization, because there are also very, very good kind of activists and people, NGOs who are doing exceptional work in the area of environment, and they raise issues which clearly needs to be highlighted, which has to be raised. They go to the court, and they kind of raise very, very pertinent issues. So, but having said that, I think it's also, and that also answers your question, because you have to raise these kind of issues which need to be highlighted. You have to raise these issues so that it comes to the attention of the honorable judiciary, it comes to the attention of the government, and then it's kind of addressed in the form of policy making. But in terms through consumers, like I said, I think all of us are equally responsible, because we drive the change. If you decide tomorrow that you're not going to use any product which clearly has a certain adverse impact on the environment, clearly then they will kind of change themselves. The companies which are manufacturing, they'll ensure that we start manufacturing products which are actually seen as sustainable, and that will drive the change. So ultimately everyone is driven by the moolah, right? So that's how it works. I think that answers your question, right?
I will add something to that. Our chief guest today, Justice, told us when he was advising the state government, the bureaucrats used to go to him and ask him, हम ठीक तो कर रहे हैं ना, हम कोर्ट को जवाब दे पाएंगे ना, हम कोई गलती तो नहीं कर रहे हैं ना. You generation are blessed with the NGT Act. As he said, many people may be misusing it and many people are using it in the right direction. In my view, in the society, in industry, as well as in the bureaucracy, there are a lot of people who are compelled to do wrong because of the obligations they have as long as they are employees of that place. But there are lots of crusaders there also. So you need to understand, if you can challenge the government for a wrong law, and if that law is set right, the whole country benefits out of it.
Sir,
I made a very simple statement.
Yeah, thank you. See, in NGOs, if I could summarize, number one, NGOs being active, NGOs raising campaign and movement, NGOs in the area of preventing an industry or highlighting a business or advancing the interest of that community in ESG implementation, and NGOs also in terms of, let us say, as in the West, they have been representing investors in the West. In Poland, they saw that investors are aware about what they are investing in, and they prevented the operation of that industry, which is going against climate. This is the way. Over to, yeah, please. Only 2 questions we can take, and then we end, because it's very long. You all also have to have your lunch. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the wonderful session. So my question pertains to the entire panel. Since costs are one of the major concerns for the industry to implement ESG standards, how can the consumers as stakeholders affect the choices they make? So for example, can consumers willfully stop preferring climate unfriendly products, or does law have to come in and play a role? For example, banning of single-use plastics, etc. So because if there is a demand for climate-heavy products, then the industry would have no incentives to stop manufacturing or dealing in them. So what are your takes on that?
Also has to intervene, and it has to come from, it has to be a collective ethos change, all right? So it has to happen in tandem, both.
Thank you so much.
It's not binary, yeah, it's both cumulative.
My question is, as discussed by the panel, that there is problem in the very framing of ESG regulations, in the sense that they treat industry as a villain rather than as a service provider. So this necessitates a change in the way such ESG regulations are framed. So my question is, how such change can be brought about?
I don't think anyone sees anyone as a villain. I mean, just a correction. All right. So the idea simply is clearly there is a regulatory burden attached to it. Okay. So if we've had a lot of cases where that people would come to me and say that we've already had all these compliances. Ye naya kya aa gaya? So that's of course there. But see, to say that, and maybe you may want to rephrase that, because to say that anyone is a villain or whatever, that's not true. It's more in terms of regulatory compliance burden and stuff like that, and clearly there are costs attached, like Mr. Jain was also mentioning earlier. But then the idea is till the time, so if you are actually able to convey the merit of it, there is a whole lot of merit attached to it, the whole reporting, because see, when you're actually kind of trying to collate data and information, maybe through AI, blockchain, or whichever way, through your EHS team and stuff like that, you're actually kind of revisiting a lot of things, a lot of things that you may or may not be doing correctly in the past. So that is a great exercise in terms of setting your house in order. So I think there is a lot of merit attached to it, and irrespective of whether you're falling in the top 1,000, because see, you are anyway, when we're talking about top 1,000, we're talking about top 1,000 listed companies. So you are actually responsible to a lot of people. So which is where I think there's a lot of merit in terms of ESG compliance, and clearly for the other companies, because we don't know when it will become mandatory in terms of reporting for the other 1,000 or first 5,000 or whatever. So it's a good way to kind of ensure that you start doing the right things and revisiting a whole lot of things that you're doing with respect to the E, S, and G of it, and set your house in order and be prepared. No villains here.
Danya, how do you think they can balance?
In my opinion, ESG regulations even today is volunteer. Top 1,000 companies have to disclose a list of parameters specified by SEBI. So based on what they disclose, how they disclose, it's the investor who will decide whether they should put their money into that company or not. So it's not regulation. So regulation is तुमको करना ही है, performance improve करना ही है, पैसे भले ही जितना भी लगे तुमको कंजम्पशन, एनर्जी कंजम्पशन कम करना ही है. No. But on the other hand, if you talk about regulation, the Electricity Act compels mandatorily that the power transmission companies have to mandatorily source 20% of their energy from renewable energy source. That is regulation. It's very welcome. So that's how the regulation versus voluntary disclosures work. I think the girl right in front of the camera
speak,
is trying
but
to
before
ask.
that, let Ms. Danya respond to this question, and then the lady there who is trying to ask a question. Yeah, please, quickly.
Like Sir said, they're not being treated like villains, but if they want to feel good about doing these disclosures, undertaking these cumbersome processes, one way for the government to go about it is give more positive incentives like tax benefits. Take some of that onus off the companies and take it upon themselves, and then in long run it will become a habit and they will pick up on it. Initially just pick up, give them like 5% tax off or something, give them a benefit. Make it seem like there is an ice cream.
Okay, it's a good way of balancing. Yeah. No, there's a girl there who was asking question. Yeah. First, the girl student. Who you were raising the hand, right?
Who is raising? Stand up. He's only asking.
Yeah, quickly. We're already late.
So my question was to the entire panel. So there was a lot of discussion about how the citizens should drive the change, and they should do it in terms of altering the consumption patterns. So I wanted to ask how this would function in the context of advertising and the manufacturing of new wants by businesses, and also in the context of the jurisprudence around absolute liability in India, where their mere operation and the profit earning is itself seen as an investment, as an incentive to function.
Liability itself is ever evolving. So, in fact, what's your name? Yeah, how about we take this sidebar, because it'll take me forever, but we can have a sidebar conversation. This is quite intriguing.
There's a liability under the Consumer Protection Act for misleading advertisements, and within that, whether sustainability is a great.
Also, if you recall what Danya was actually talking about, she was actually referring to that, so even when it comes to sustainability, you cannot be kind of saying that, the product we sell is absolutely organic and stuff like that. So all these regulations are being put in place now, and that has just come in March, I think, what you're talking about, right? So the thing is that, see, the regulators are aware, and the good part is that if you talk about sustainability also, not just in terms of ESG reporting or SEBI and stuff, I think there is a whole lot of, awareness in terms of where you want to catch the bluff. So that is happening. So I think in terms of, I think your question was limited to the advertising bit. I think now, not just in terms of sustainability, I think also in terms of Baba Ramdev and all that he claims, I think there is a whole lot of awareness. So that's happening. Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir. Actually, my question was slightly different. Actually, I was talking in terms of the usually raised argument that earlier there were less needs. So people, and now the businesses have, through advertising, created new wants. Like people now want new services, they want new products. So my question was actually in those
So
terms.
behavioral influence, I think what you're saying basically is how they're trying to influence behavior and consumer preferences. So I think that is something which you have to be mindful of as a consumer, that whether you want to catch the bluff or you want to be making sure that you really need this Apple Watch, or you can do it with some other watch also, which is lesser in cost and maybe manufactured more sustainably and much lesser in terms of cost. Because sometimes all of us have been made to believe that if you don't carry a certain phone or wear a certain watch, then you really need it. And I think, and sorry, I shouldn't be naming any company or whatever.
So it's, I think, the conflict between right to choose, right to safety, and the idea of need. Need is not a legal, need doesn't have a legal basis, unless it has a legal basis, we cannot bring it.
Ma'am, the question, if I may, so the question is quite nuanced, because he's asking about there's a premium that a consumer is paying, right? So if the consumer is initiated, there are two alternatives. For instance, there are two products, similar products, interchangeable products, but one claims to have involved or be a product of a more sustainable development process, and then there is a whole set of consumer community, which gravitates towards it. Now, if there is a higher premium payable, if the person is paying more towards it, basis a misrepresentation. So let's say the person, and this is greenwashing again. So should there be a higher threshold? Should that person who's violated the law be punished, and the penal provision should be higher than a person ordinarily would have been misrepresenting? Okay, the answer, the jury is still out, because it's an evolving law. And that's the reason I said we should have a sidebar, because it's quite, I catch your drift, but it's a huge hell lot of jurisprudence behind it.
I think Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay answered it in one sentence. As long as you make the cost of compliance cheaper than cost of non-compliance, your answer lies in that.
I think his question is about creating new needs in terms of social acceptance and being loved or something like that, where the human passion is referred as a reference point. It's a cultural connotation. Now that as a legal basis to be brought in terms of imposing a choice rather than facilitating the right of choice, which is highlighted in the Consumer Protection Act, is to be seen case to case by case to case basis, based on the material, based on the what we call as manipulation of the customer dimension, misinformation, disinformation, selective information. There are different layers involved here, which have to be evidentially, forensically proved in front of the court of law. So it needs longer discussion, but a good hypothesis. Thank you.
If I may add to this question, I want to club two of the questions which was asked, because I think that they are answering themselves. You were talking about how advertisements make us feel like we need some things. This is where your non-state actors can come into picture. Create education and training, raise awareness. Where consumers are aware, they know about their rights, they know about greenwashing. And we are talking about where supply is driving demand, but demand is what drives supply also, you have to remember. So when there is consumer awareness, there creates an increase in demand, which will change the course of corporates into meeting that demand. So that's where the non-state actors can come into picture. Somebody had asked, what can they do? Educating.
Prior information. Yeah, over to you. Yeah, the girl here. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. So the question is, like, I get it, like, we are all talking about the financial structures and everything, how it's implemented. But India, it's still a developing country. How do you implement, as ma'am just correctly mentioned, the awareness in the village areas? Because see, I will consider myself very lucky to be sitting here in a podium, like in an air-conditioned area, where I understand, if not completely, as sir mentioned, at least 15% of it, not maybe completely. But how will a person, or how will the awareness be spread in a developing country like India, especially in villages, where still there is single-use plastic and everything is there? Corporation is fine.
I answered you that. I answered you that. What Swedish government called 30 people from developing nations of Southeast Asia is what you need to do for the villages which we are talking about. It has to be through communication, but you're lucky you're in an age where that last man in the village which you're talking about also has a mobile, which is smartphone, and WhatsApp and all kind of Facebooks, they are there. So all these influencers on social media is the way it is happening. It's happening.
It's exactly, that's my point.
So that will further enhance, because now the education level at the village level is also increasing. So remember again, Europeans took 80 years. Correct. We would have taken 400 years. So
Naren,
to cut it short, all of us have to work.
It's not that simple. This assumption that people in the villages are not aware, they don't know, and we need to teach them. I think there is a lot to learn from our grassroots. In fact, there's a lot of unlearning to be done in the urban space to learn from our villages. So I think we are really well into the time of lunch, so I'm going to request the moderator to maybe bring the curtains down unless...
To students who had put their hand up, you have lost your chance because you didn't come early. So 3 of you can come in the sidelines and talk to the resource persons who will be with us for another half an hour. So with this, we wind up our discussion, and it has been very enriching. And thank you, audience. You have been very inspiring, including our chief guest, Justice Deshmukh sir. And I deem it a privilege to have been a facilitator for this wonderful panel. It has been a great learning. Thank you, each and every one of you, for having spared your valuable time and having given your resources without any hindrance or withdrawing. All the best to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you for that riveting panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw closer to the culmination of our event, it's my pleasure to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those who have contributed to making this occasion a resounding success. At this juncture, allow me to introduce and invite Dr. Aparajita Mohanty ma'am, Deputy Director, Symbiosis Law School, Pune, to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Raghavendra. As we come to an end of this intellectually stimulating 7th edition of Conclave, enhancing legal frameworks for sustainable business, prioritizing ESG and climate, it's my honor and privilege to extend a formal vote of thanks. On behalf of management of Symbiosis, Dean and Director, Dr. Shashikala Gurpur ma'am, I thank Honorable Justice Sanjay Deshmukh sir, Judge, High Court of Bombay, for consenting to be the chief guest and encourage the students by way of his erudite speech and also positively impacting the young minds. I express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed members of the panel for this prestigious conclave. A sincere note of thanks and gratitude to Senior Advocate of Supreme Court of India, Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay, Mr. Navneet Symbhav, partner at SAM, Mr. Narendra Kumar Jain, Vice President, Environment at Jubilant Group, and Mr. Purusarth Singh, partner, co-chair and co, and our very own Dhanya. The kind of discussion and the quality of it has been indeed phenomenal and has acted as a fodder to the young minds. I'm sure each one of us present here will take a lot of learning with us. The panel has taken us through the entire gamut of ESG-related issues, related themes, regulations, dilemma, debates, and hopes and suggestions. Indeed, a very holistic discussion encompassing all the aspects of the theme in variety of contexts. I thank Dr. Shashikala Gurpur ma'am for navigating the discussion in the most efficient manner. Ma'am, I also thank you in guiding the students in the process of meticulous planning and execution. Thank you, ma'am. Today's conclave is the result of untiring efforts of the conclave team of students. We thank the students team for their seamless planning and execution. Thank you. I thank the faculty team of Symbhav for the support rendered and the time invested in ensuring the conclave, ensuring that the conclave team works in the most concerted manner. I thank the faculty for attending the conclave. I also thank all the students for attending this. And I thank the team, admin team for the support rendered. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would kindly request Dr. Gurpur ma'am and all esteemed dignitaries to proceed to the conference room for the lunch and the faculty members to move to the dining area for the same. Thank you. The students